Hello, and welcome back to Podfinder. My name is Philip, and today I'm joined by my friend Jake.
I'm so happy to be here talking about vampires.
Me too. So this is kicking off Halloween month on both our channels, and over at Podfinder, I will be doing vampire-themed videos for the month of October. So figured what better way to kick things off than by just kind of doing an overview of what vampires are in Pathfinder, kind of what role they play, and what different types of vampires exist in the setting. Because Pathfinder or Paizo has definitely given them a lot of love, and I think it'd be a really fun way to kind of just give everybody a intro to vampirism in the setting. And all of my history with vampires comes from media, whereas Jake, I know that your perspective on vampires and vampirism is informed from very different sources. So
Yeah,
I
personal
think we'll have a
experience and
good
research.
conversation.
Yeah.
So without further ado, I wanted to start things off and say all of my vampire knowledge comes from basically movies and books and shows. Uh, excuse me. These are a few that have stood out to me. I'm not like a crazy vampire lore nerd or anything. I just always gravitate towards vampire media that I think is particularly fun or interesting or over the top in some like particularly cool way. Like my favorite Dracula interpretation is Richard Roxburgh in Van Helsing from 2004. It's just so over the top. It's
It
so
is, and he's
good.
so passionate about everything.
I know every single line is just hamming it up for the camera, and I love it. I love Bram Stoker's Dracula, the 1992 movie. I think it's great.
Gary Oldman's
Um,
amazing.
Gary Oldman is fantastic. I mean, there is a particular person in the cast who isn't doing the best performance, but it's Keanu, so I'll give him a pass.
I love that you were circling him.
Yeah. It's just good. Like I love what they're doing with the camera and like it's Coppola. Like it's got a style. I saw Nosferatu last year. It like my brother and I saw it on like Thanksgiving. It blew our minds with how good it was. I don't know if you've seen that one yet, but
Yes, I have. And I
yeah,
want to point out that our modern belief of vampires being damaged by sunlight came strictly from the original Nosferatu.
I totally believe that because I've always been like, wait a minute, that's not in the book. He's
It's
just
not.
mostly out at night. It is funny how that one is just blatant copyright infringement. We're like, no, it's so good, we don't care. Uh,
It's
oh,
not
and
the
then it
same. His name's Count Orlok. It's completely different.
completely different. Ignore, yeah, we didn't shave the serial numbers off at all. I love Blade. I mean, when I proposed this to you and we agreed to do this video, I think we both sent Blade gifts at the exact same time
Of the same scene.
of the exact same scene. Vampire Rave is one of the best scenes in filmmaking. I'm
It
not
is
hearing
freaking
argument on
awesome.
that. It's so good.
It
Uh,
is also over the top, and I did
oh,
not expect it when it started.
yeah, yo, not at all. Like it's so over the top. It's so campy, and like the way that he could just deliver some of the most insane lines you've ever heard in your life. Like I will always be a fan of any actor that can pull off some motherfuckers always trying to ice skate uphill. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, thank you.
He's very good at badass.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah. Uh, and then like other beyond just movies, like there's shows. I mean, have you seen Midnight Mass yet?
I think I saw the first episode, so no, not really.
Okay, this one absolutely blew me away when I watched it for the first time. I mean, it's if you grew up in a like semi-religious household, it's like I didn't grow up Catholic, I grew up Protestant, but it's very like pardon the pun, agnostic of which denomination you grew up in, but it's very it does a good job of tying like mysteries and vampirism into Catholicism and like the road to radicalization. So it's just a really
That's
interesting take.
interesting.
It's super interesting and it's super satisfying the way they managed to really stick the landing. So very solid. Obviously, love Castlevania Nocturne. Fair warning for everybody who hasn't seen them. Queer awakenings abound. They for everyone, all members of any and all genders will find someone to like in this show. Love it. Great. Good stuff. And then, of course, the books. Dracula is the classic, but I also,
Mm.
one that I don't hear a lot of buzz about that I really enjoyed was Fever Dream by George R. R.
I
Martin.
had never heard of it.
It's pretty decent. I quite liked it. It's going to sound weird to say it feels like Game of Thrones because it's a vampire novel set in like the late 1800s riverboat era of the United States. Uh, it's a very strange setting, but it's got a lot of his classic, like, prophecy is bullshit, only power matters, like, don't think yourself special. Like,
Okay.
it's got a lot of his, like, kind of very like power obsessed worldview. So it was nice and refreshing. And then I didn't write it down, but obviously, like everybody in my generation, I read Twilight much to my own frustration.
Yeah.
But this is ones I look back on fondly, not ones that I would rather forget. So
I read the first Twilight, and then the next movie came out, and I'm like, you know what? Fuck it. I'll just watch it.
yeah. I read all four of them because I was like, I've already committed this one, in for a dime, in for a dollar. But I didn't enjoy it. Although the fourth movie does have, or was it the fifth movie, has one of, why can't I think of his name? Like one of the goofy vampire actors does the most insane laugh I've ever seen in a movie, and it's great. Just a grand old time. He's the only guy who knew what movie he was in.
I know that it's going to be an unpopular opinion, but I would really like Rami Malek's elemental character. That his vampire power was, I just control all the elements.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, so control emotions, see the future, cause mental pain. The
Right.
Avatar. I think there's a very slight power scaling problem here, but I'm cool with it.
Yeah, it's taking from vampire folklore and then just God.
Yep. Some of it's like, what did he do? Because like, if I remember right, like their powers as vampires are partly defined by what they were good at in life. Like if you were a good fighter in life, you're a great fighter as a vampire. If you are like vaguely clairvoyant with some kind of mysticism, boom, as a vampire you can see the future. I'm like, what did Rami Malek do?
Right. Did he start off as a real Ifrit or something?
Yeah, like could he just like make like tiny little flames with his hands? Because I still feel like he would have gotten a lot of attention.
He was really just a pyromaniac. He burned down a barn and became a vampire.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so that is like my broad history with vampirism. Like it's just a bunch of movies and video games and tropes that I've fallen in love with over the years. But now I want to turn the question back on you because I know you and I have had, I'm sure there's some overlap with like all the movies that we've seen, but
yeah.
like you've got, I'm sure, a completely different perspective on vampirism. And from what I understand, you are a lot more informed of different aspects of vampirism in the broader culture.
Yeah, occultism in general. I mean, how occult practices, how the occult practices vampirism and what their beliefs are that is mythology and what their beliefs are that is real in current day. So that's my personal experience. And also, I've just always loved vampires. I think I started reading probably before I should have. Like, started reading Vampirotica when I was like 13.
Nice.
I didn't realize it. I was just like, oh, vampire book. Oh, werewolf book. I just read everything that was supernatural that I could.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've read countless short stories that are vampires. And so I have a lot of different ideas about what vampires could do and could be, including there was this one short story. I'm sorry, I'll be brief. The guy's name was Augustus, and he had died as a Roman soldier. He was crucified along with his entire platoon or squad or 100 men, however many, whatever that title is. And he survived on their screams. When they died, he felt more alive and he freed himself with the strength that was leaving their bodies. So he was a vampire in that he was powered by sound that was fueled by passion. He didn't drink blood. He was just like, he hired singers to feed him.
I have never heard of a take like that before, but that's really cool.
Yeah, interesting. All right, so my history, I haven't watched, okay, I've watched really old anime and nothing like recent-ish in the last couple decades.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't seen the Castlevania series, or if there's movies, I haven't seen those either. I've seen lots of old Dracula and vampire films. I used to work at Blockbuster Video. Yes,
Ooh,
I'm that old.
nice.
And I checked out vampire movies every week until they ran out. And then I checked out all the anime until they ran out.
Nice.
Um, but I don't know where it fits in this video, but I
Mhm.
could talk about how. Oh no, that's right. We're going to talk about it after the next segment
Yeah, so I
about
think
real
yeah,
life
you're talking about
vampires
like what is vampirism
in
in
real life. Yeah.
in the real world. Yeah, like what do people like what are occult practices in the real world surrounding vampirism? And I think that's a great that'll be a great segue out of what is vampirism in Pathfinder before I start getting into the nitty-gritty. So, what is vampirism in Pathfinder? So, the way I think of it, vampire it has kind of three meanings in terms of how players will interact with it in the system. Vampire can be an adversarial creature. So, typically, it refers to like a few families of monsters who have a set of shared traits. Broadly speaking, they're undead. They are generally nocturnal, not exclusively, but almost exclusively. They consume the essence of living victims, not necessarily the blood, but often. And then they are very, very difficult to kill. You have to perform very specific tasks in order to kill them. And they can only, they have like a level of invulnerability, or if not invulnerability, then they'll just keep coming back if you don't put them down in exactly the right way. So that's kind of how players could interact with them in an antagonistic sense. On the
Research
more
knowledge is your friend.
yes, yes,
Sorry, recall
yeah,
knowledge.
yeah, recall knowledge or a thaumaturge. So the other way they can kind of interact with them in sort of an antagonistic way is as a curse. So like back in first edition, there were, I think it was in Horror Adventures, one of those really big supplements they released for first edition. Um, there were rules for ways that curses could afflict your character and like slowly progress over time. And these would be things like werewolfism, things like demon possession, or like possession by like an outer, an outer rifts monster eldritch god thing. I'm not an HP Lovecraft guy. I don't get that. But vampirism was one of those things. So like once you were fed upon by a vampire, I forget if it was one time or if it was a bunch of times. Eventually, you would be afflicted with like a minor version of vampirism. You weren't a full vampire yet, but as it got worse and worse and worse, you would need to start consuming blood in order to not take pretty serious like stat penalties to your character. But at the same time, like you would start gaining a lot of the classic vampiric abilities, things like charm, things like supernatural agility. You would get association with animals, like you can see here, like wolves being associated with vampires, which that dates back forever. But like this was like a curse that your
Third
character.
millennia BCE.
Thank you very much. Like I said, forever. But this was very much like this was framed as very much a bad thing. Like, and I'm sure, like we're all tabletop RPG nerds. Your character turning into a vampire isn't a bad thing.
It's awesome.
It's awesome. But the mechanics are designed to make it feel like a bad thing, or with the assumption that you treat it as a bad thing, at least in universe, even if you out of universe are like, yes, this is exactly what I wanted. And now that they've gotten into 2E, I mean, we just have the vampire archetype. It's Book of the Dead presents a bunch of undead archetypes, which are very cool. Vampire is just a thing you can play now. If your character dies, is killed by a vampire, or in a number of other ways, depending on the subtype of vampire, you could just wake up the next morning, play your same character, and they're just the vampire archetype now. You don't have to do this whole curse thing. It's like, nope, I'm a vampire. We took 24 hours for my character to retrain a class feat into vampire dedication. We're done.
It is kind of sad. There's no struggle. There's no loss. There's no angst.
And I like that. I think the really cool way, if you had a GM and a group and a party of players that were willing to play with it, I think you could have a lot of fun by kind of implementing some of the old 1E curse onset rules to really get yourself into the headspace of, oh, I've turned into a vampire. This is bad. And it's going to be a lot of pain and suffering for my character. I'm glad the archetype exists because like it's cool, but I do wish there was some of that curse stuff that you could really play with still. And
Totally.
honestly, there probably will be. 2E is still pretty young as a system. Like they'll expand something like that eventually, I'm sure.
I'm probably not in the minority, but I'm really excited for them to remaster Vampire Archetype.
Yeah, yeah, I'm curious if they will, but
Yeah, they
I
might not.
they might not. Like it's I would love to see it. But we'll get into the vampire archetype. But before we do that, I want so like this is vampirism in Pathfinder, and I think this could be an interesting place to contrast like what is vampirism from the perspective of like, real world occultic practice in,
Cool.
in our world today or even historically.
Um, well, yeah, let's see. So, okay, so I guess I'll just start whatever's on the top of my head. So, people that are current day practitioners of vampirism, they tend to be what they refer to as energy vampires or spiritual vampires. And that is that they don't feed on blood. They touch their victims to drain energy from them psychically, which is why psychic vampires.
Hmm.
But they also use psychic vampire as a derogatory term to refer to someone in your life who is just fucking draining because they're so annoying and needy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why energy vampire came about. Psychic vampire is technically correct, but it can be confusing. And there is also separate from the psychic slash energy vampires, there are sanguinarians, or in some small cultures, subsects of that culture, I've heard them referred to as sanguines. And those are people who actually, um, whether it's with a loved one or their own house, that's the vampire term for a clan, or
Okay. Yeah.
cabal or circle, like a witch's circle. Um, they they taste blood or drink blood. It varies. I mean, people say nobody drinks blood anymore, but you know what? People are weird, so they might. Doesn't matter if it's bad for you; they'll probably do it. But no,
It's
they
2025. Somebody's drinking blood.
right. Oh, and that reminds me, there are reported cases going back centuries of different people who didn't claim to be vampires but drank blood of their victims. They were really just serial killers. And
Hmm.
then the media made them out to be vampires because they drank blood. They were just fucking nuts.
Hmm.
So it doesn't mean that you're a vampire because you're drinking blood. You're probably just crazy. But the sanguines, the sanguinarians, believe that they get more life essence, vitae, whatever you want to call it, from the physical sampling of blood and the energy stored in that from a donor or a victim, depending on the relationship. Um, that than they would just touching someone and getting energy, even though they technically can do that because they're aware of energy pathways. Speaking of which, if you've ever heard of a Reiki master or someone who practices Reiki, it's the same process.
Hmm.
It's the same passing of energy, just in reverse.
Okay. Because I have heard of that. Yeah. Okay.
Generally, people who see themselves as energy vampires also practice Reiki because they already understand energy.
Okay. Okay. Hmm. Interesting. And so, like, is I mean, maybe this isn't something but like these modern like occult vampiric practices, is this derived from like a practice that's gone on for a while, or is this something that they derived from Reiki, or is like, do you know, like, if is there like a continuous tradition that these people are drawing on, or is this kind of a thing that kind of evolved from a more pop culture like interpretation? I don't know.
I will give you the overview of the history in
Okay.
recent decades, century.
Hmm.
So prior to 1991, and I'll get to why I'm making that distinction in a moment. Prior to that, there were people who believed that they were lacking energy and that they needed energy. And some people believed that they were vampires because they felt better around people who were high energy, like outgoing and boisterous and told jokes and stuff. And they noticed that they felt better for a while after that. Sort of the reverse of most of us recluses that just want to stay inside.
Guilty. Yes. Mhm.
Yeah. I actually thought I was that, but now I realize that my true self is way the hell more outgoing. I just really like connecting. So prior to 91, they were people who just sort of lived on their own or conducted practices of energy vampirism or energy path work in their witch slash Wiccan slash pagan rituals because they just felt a need for it. Like they might have even prayed to their pagan deities for more energy and held ritual with that to do so, or with other friends to ask them for their energy in a communal space where it was easy for them to sort of, in their mind, sample their energy and feel better after the ritual because they had other people present that they could take their energy. And there's a morality shift here as well. Like people tend to at least outwardly say, I always ask permission, or I never do it without permission. But if you believe that that is your path, that you draw energy from other people, it didn't start out asking permission. You didn't realize you were doing it. So there are people that don't really care about asking permission because they think the other person won't notice anyway. Hence, psychic vampires, they just do it without letting the other person know. And if the energy vampires take energy by touching someone, it's really easy to get close to someone, touch them, and take their energy without telling them about it. So that was pre-91. People simply believed that they had an issue with energy, whether it's from a chronic disease or just they have constant lethargy or they don't get enough sleep, and they thought that they needed other people's energy to help them out. Granted, there were probably people who just wanted to be vampires too, like maybe lived in a goth scene and fantasized about drinking blood, or actually drank their own blood or other people's. I don't know, animal blood. I don't know. But for the most part, it was just people who thought that they were lacking something energy-wise and that they might be vampires of some sort. Come 91, Vampire the Masquerade comes out, and it creates an online presence for vampires to meet and to talk about their beliefs.
You said 91, and I was like, that's when Vampire the Masquerade came out, I think.
Yes, it is. And it created an online space for people to freely talk about their actual beliefs of vampirism. And some people created I shouldn't say some people, one guy created the idea of vampiric houses. I don't remember his name, so I'm not going to quote it, but he referred to himself as the Emperor of Vampires. And he's
humble.
He's so humble. Yeah. Look at this guy. He looks totally humble too. He's like a punk rocker. He made certain, I guess, castes or houses saying that this kind of vampire is this name and they fit this descriptor generally. So if you're in that house, you can claim that title for yourself. That's who you are. And one of those houses is the Vrikolakis. And that's the house that I'm most familiar with.
Okay.
So the Vrikolakis believe that they are touched by psychism and madness, sort of like the Malkavians in Vampire the Masquerade, if you've played that. So each house has their own little specifics that they may have drawn from the game or maybe not have, or maybe they just felt validated by the game talking about these things and they're like, yeah, that's me, and they identified with it. Are there probably some over-identifying sycophants, unhealthy people out there who just joined the group? Yeah, because that happens. So starting in 91, there was really a bigger networking and sort of an explosion of people feeling safe, finding spaces to be vampires.
So it's like a, like a subculture feeding into a pop culture, feeding into a subculture loop.
Oh, it's funny. I like that. Yeah.
I mean, it really is, like that makes sense though. Cause that's how the world works, like that's how everything works. So I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but yeah, that makes sense. All right. So it sounds like sorry, go ahead.
Just one more thing to add. I knew a lady who met one of these people online and joined his coven and got embraced. And the embrace of normal mortal to becoming vampire varies depending on the house or clan, if you want to call them that. And this one was just, he put an amulet on me and he said, you're mine. And then I was a vampire. But other people just grow up thinking that they have a lack of energy. And they're like, I've always been a vampire. And so you have both sides of that. You can become one or you're naturally born one.
Cool. Fascinating stuff. Like really, that's interesting to me. This is not a subculture I have any exposure. I am small town Minnesota. Like this is not something that exists where I live.
Well, I've always Okay, so I had very realistic nightmares when I was a kid, and they would happen while I was awake too. So
Mm-hmm.
I always doubted that reality was real. So I always
Mm.
dove into supernatural books and tried to understand what was real. And so
Mm-hmm.
I was open to anything being real. And so people just
Mm.
shared stuff with me.
That makes sense. I was just a nerd, so. Well, that is really cool. I think that's going to be interesting moving forward because there's a lot of vampire lore that is very clearly drawing from like different real world mythology or different things where I'm like, I feel like that maybe got pulled from Masquerade, but I don't know because I don't play. So I'm very curious to see how you like how what your perspective is on some of this stuff. But
Oh, speaking of which, can I talk about the very hard to kill real quick in real
yeah,
life?
yep,
This
mhm,
is folklore. So the very hard to kill segment of vampirism that originated because the folklore at the time, and I'm talking like before there were lit street lamps, so dark ages way back when.
mhm,
Um, I don't have a time frame. Um, there were just little community beliefs about ghosts and spirits,
mhm,
and they kind of imagined that these folktales that people have been saying for generations were accurate in a variety of ways, thus giving rise to a variety of strains of ghosts, spirits, witches, trolls, and vampires.
mhm,
And so each one had its own way to kill it,
mhm,
and some of it later became uh, morphed because then the church took over these pagan lands.
mhm.
And so then, you know what? Since the church has the cross and Jesus, then maybe this can only be killed by the type of wood of a stake driven through its heart that was made from the same type of wood as Jesus's cross.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so things kept morphing and changing. So
Yeah,
that's why
and
it's very hard to kill lots of different specific ways.
yeah, and that I think that makes a lot of sense. And the other thing that the one of the very few things that I do know about like ancient like folklore and mythology is that like their understanding of like their mythology was a lot less like boxed into what we would consider a definition nowadays to
Oh
like,
yeah,
vampire, witch, werewolf. Like there was a lot of crossbreeding, and we just kind of use a modern term to kind of
right.
box in a very broad section of beliefs. Like one of the things that we'll get to later, like we have the very clearly European vampires, the very clearly Indian vampires, and the very clearly like East Asian vampires. And it's like, okay, but we're using the word vampire, but these aren't the same thing. Like the game is making Paizo is making a stretch to call these the same thing. And they have like a lore excuse for why they're so different. But realistically, it's like these evolved independently. And there's a lot
Yeah.
more cross pollination between like the Jiangxi and the other local like monsters and undead and demon in East Asia than there is between the Jiangxi and the like Strigoi or the Moroi or like the more Western vampires. So it's interesting that we're kind of boxing them into this pretty standard definition when
Mhm.
very clearly the people at the time are like, no, you can't do that. Like that's not how this works.
And after we talk about some of the subtypes of vampires in Pathfinder 2, I want to talk about how some of the lore got confused between the different vampire subtypes.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. There's actually one. The Vitala and the Vitalarana, that is a really good example of that because Paizo really hard retconned the Vitala into the Vitalarana, which
Oh,
might be due to that, but I am not at all familiar with Indian folklore, so I don't know. But I guess we'll find out or we won't, but we'll get there.
okay.
All right, cool. So let's jump to like vampire as an archetype that players can actually play. A couple years ago, Book of the Dead came out. I love Book of
Woo!
the Dead. It's so good. It's so good. I love that Geb is the author, like Ghost King himself, and you can hear so much snark. It's so great.
Yeah,
Uh,
I like that it has his attitude.
yeah, it's fantastic. It gives such an insight into a character that we don't really interact with outside of Bloodlords. So it's really fun.
Divine Mysteries, they did something similar with the Nozoi doing all the speaking. I like that
Yes.
they're adding depth with character.
Yeah, so much fun. So much fun. And it's a really convenient excuse to retcon later. Like, no, she was just wrong about this part.
Oh my God, I didn't think about that. You're right. You
Yeah,
can just
because the
point
whole
at,
thing is framed as like a doctoral thesis. It's like, no, she was just wrong.
right, or lying.
Or lying. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's good thinking.
So the vampire archetype itself, I like what they were going for. It feels very slightly underpowered to me, only with a caveat. Only because these are class feats and they feel a little underpowered for class feats. I think like because you're giving up a powerful class feat for these, they don't feel super strong. But I get it. You don't want to make the game unbalanced. When I run these, I do allow you to take these instead of ancestry feats as well, and I
Oh, that
think that
makes
makes
sense.
them feel a little bit better. You know, because
Yeah,
like it doesn't make sense to me that after you turn into a vampire, you can still take ancestry feats. Like
that's
it's
a
like
very
no,
good
your
point.
your physiology is changing.
Well, if you can take flight at first level as the awakened animal ancestry, why can't you get climb speed before fourth?
Yeah, and it's stuff like that. But like overall though, I like what the dedication is doing, and I kind of like the progression you get. Like I like the order in which they give things to you. You know, you get your drink blood and your basic undead benefits, and then of course a bite unarmed attack. So like they're very clearly leaning into the Moroi or the Nosferatu, you know, the ones who are actually drinking blood.
Yeah.
Then you get, you know, the standard like climbing up a walls like Dracula did. You get manipulative charm, very pretty, you know, pretty classic stuff. Nocturnal Kindred. I love that they included wolves. That's
Oh,
something that doesn't
yes.
always get included in vampire lore, so that made me very happy. And then, you know, Daywalker, great name for a feat. It's just the advanced undead benefits. It's fine. Predatory Claws, Claw, and Armed Attack.
Well,
I
no,
like
it,
it.
it also affects how you interact with sunlight.
That's true. That's true. It does. I do like that they did that, which is
Yeah.
funny because that's not something that most vampires can do. Uh, like most of them, even the powerful ones, for certain vampire subtypes, just straight up can't go out during the day, no matter how
Right.
strong they are. So that
Right.
that feels more of like we did this to make the player not suffer. And I'm
Oh,
like,
this is all just player service.
yeah, which is fine. Like it lets you play the fantasy of being a vampire, even if they definitely twisted the lore to make it work. But I get it. It's a game. You want the game to be fun. Fish's fangs, you know, bleed damage on a crit with fangs. Yeah, you should be causing bleed damage with your fangs. I like that.
I know
Uh,
from the beginning.
yep, yeah. Bat form, love it. Turn to mist, love it. Coffin bound, pretty good. Like I don't mind it. I like
It's
the
not going to
way.
come up.
What was that?
It's not going to come up.
No, it's not going to come up, but it's fun. I like that. I what I don't like is that it's generic, and the reason I say it's generic is because this is like the Strigoi version of how the coffin works. It is not the way the coffin works for any of the other vampires.
Oh.
Or excuse me, the Moroi version. The other vampires are way more creative and like very specific. So like if I was running a vampire campaign and my player came to me and was like, "Hey, can we make me more like this other subtype of vampire?" Yes,
Yeah,
100%.
totally.
Like that's way more fun. And then Dominating Gaze, like it's a classic. I like it. I like the vampiric hypnotism, like the association between vampires and hypnotism. It's cool. But you messaged me before this. You have some suggestions, and I read through the wall of text, and I was like, okay, I like what I'm seeing, but talk me through this.
It's a little too wordy, I know.
No. I didn't mean it like that. I was just we're all nerds. We have a tendency to write or talk too much. So I was just mocking that.
True. Well, I think that vampires don't have enough strengths and not enough weaknesses.
Hmm.
So I think that to start off with, they should be more drained and then become more feral and bestial and effective at hunting blood the more drained they get because they're hungry. They're not just weak.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that's why whenever they are waking up for the day, their drain value increases by 2. It's not set to a
Mm.
certain number, it just keeps increasing. And when they get to drain 3, they get life sense. And at drain 6, they gain quickened. That's until they drink enough blood to go below that drain value.
Hmm. Hmm.
And they also have a drink blood ability to lower their drain value, which
Hmm.
makes sense to me. And also high speed regeneration. This is the deviant feat with a twist. So it's high speed regeneration, but it also doesn't function in sunlight from fire damage, or sorry, it doesn't function in sunlight, it doesn't function from mental damage, it doesn't function while you're drained at all. So if you wake up and
Oh.
you go hunting, you're risking your life.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and otherwise, it still functions as high speed regeneration. So the GM still gets to choose things that you don't know about that affects your regeneration, which
Hmm.
is convenient because later on in the adventure, you can just be like, that guy just stabbed you with glass. That's a weakness you have. You don't
Hmm.
regenerate anymore during this fight.
I like that.
Yeah, it's
I
fun.
also
It's
like that
interesting.
if your GM is playing along with the type of vampire you want to be, then their decision can be made for them of like, oh no, you're this type of vampire. If you take damage from a darkwood weapon, done. No more, no more regeneration for you. Sorry. But this is cool. I really like the high risk, high reward thing that this induces in the player. Like it feels very reminiscent of like kind of the way I envision an Oracle's curse, and not necessarily the way the Oracle's
Oh, I
curse
see.
actually works. But
Yeah.
this feels a lot like that, where like, no, you could just not eat and make yourself more powerful, but you're also becoming a glass cannon. Like I really like that as a concept. That's really cool.
I'm glad. Have to admit, I stole something from Vampire the Masquerade, and that was if you drop to 0 hit points while you're from being drained, you don't die. You
Hmm.
instead become a mindless, ravening beast and try to kill everyone around you.
Hmm.
And once you are above drained, once you're better than drained one, so drain zero,
Hmm.
then you come back to your senses. But you have no memory about anything that happened during that time, and the GM controlled you.
Hmm.
So that can easily be for story background before this, or it can happen during an adventure to amplify that this sucks. So this allows the GM more freedom to fuck with your character for the good benefits you're getting.
That's really cool. I like that. And I like that your drained can't necessarily be the thing that kills you, but it can make you weaker to other things killing you. Like
Yeah.
that's really cool. Like, no, this can make you vulnerable, but it alone can't wipe you out.
Well,
That's
yeah,
a
because if that were the case, then the drama's gone. There has to
mhm,
be drama, some sort of tension.
mhm. No, I like that. And it gives your, especially if you have like uh a party of PCs who could theoretically be a food source, that's really interesting. You know,
Mm.
if it's a skeleton and like a ghost, it's like, okay, there's no point. But like if any one of them has anything resembling blood in their body, this becomes a problem.
Putting with a Goron, a Kenrasu,
Yeah. It's like, oh man. It's like we're
and
the
then like a
perfect party
Norwegian
to watch
squirrel.
this guy.
Right? Actually, yeah.
But yeah, it's like, okay, one of you's an android. I can't drink motor oil. One of you's a one of you is a puppet. You have cotton inside of you. I can't eat that.
That's like the perfect game setting to have multiple things that you can't feed from in your group. That's funny. Oh, something that I wanted to add is that in Vampire the Masquerade and in other games that I've played with vampires or undead in, including Deadlands, um, the physicality of the undead creature is hardier, but they reflect any mental issues in their body as well. Like
Hmm.
they're a concept in World of Darkness that involves a crossover between mage and vampire is that when a mage or regular human gets embraced and becomes a vampire, their spirit gets encased in their body. They become one unit. And so
Hmm.
things that affect their mind or spirituality also affect their body. And
Oh, okay. It's not like a separate entity.
right. And so
Okay.
if you with these Jake's Deluxe basic undead benefits, I can't believe I named it after myself.
I love it.
Uh, so if you have the frightened condition, you act as though you had the enfeebled condition as well because you are scared. You are inwardly cringing, and that manifests physically as you physically cringing away as well. You don't
Hmm.
have a choice. Your flesh is tied to your spirit, and your spirit is afraid. Therefore, it shrinks.
Hmm.
And stupefied, same thing as clumsy. You are awkward mentally, so you're awkward physically.
I really like that. And for reasons that will become apparent later, there's a ton of ways to give vampires the frightened condition. Like one frequent weakness that like vampires as creatures have, not necessarily as players, as creatures have, is they have this repulsion where like brandishing specific objects or performing specific deeds in front of them will just make them frightened with no save. And I really like that you could implement something like that as a GM, and this would potentially come up with that. It makes the vampire repulsions even more interesting. Like that, I
Yeah, they're
really
not
like
scary
that.
enough.
Yeah, yeah. And like then we get to like your twist on the Daywalker and your
Oh,
deluxe advanced undead benefits. And I like what you did here. I like your version of the Daywalker feat better. The
well,
original one is fine, but I like this one better.
it it just didn't add enough. I don't know flavor.
Hmm. Yeah, yep, yeah. I mean, they very clearly smoothed over the wrinkles to make it a better table experience for like players who probably experienced with the game, but not like experts and really wanting like a high risk, high reward. Like I'm super powerful, but I have these very specific weaknesses play style. Because if you the minute you get a GM who's not willing to play along, that stops being fun. But I
Yeah.
really like this as like a way to really lean into that. So those
It
of
was
you
also
who,
kind of
sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead. It was also kind of boring to like be a vampire and then your fight happens to take place during the day and you're a fighter, you're slowed.
Yep, sucks. Or God forbid you're a caster. Like, okay, cool. I'm limited to 2 action spells, and if I do those, I can't move. This is gonna be fun. I hope I'm a ranger with a bow. Otherwise, my turns just got real boring.
I'm sorry, what were you saying?
I was gonna say, so for those of you who want to feel a little more like high risk, high reward, like monster with very specific weaknesses, archetype, check this out. I like this as like a good alternate take on the vampire as a player facing archetype. It's very cool. Nice, very nice work.
I'm glad you think so. Thank you. This is the way I would want to play if I were playing a vampire.
Yeah, yeah, super fun, super again, you feel strong with these weaknesses that you really, really need to cover. So when we get into from here on out, I'm basically talking about vampires as creatures. I will not really be talking about stuff that players can experience as characters until I get to the Dampiers, because obviously we can play Dampiers. So that's pretty easy.
I want to add one to your list, Vorlogs, but I'll be brief.
Vorlog, is that a type of vampire or?
Not officially,
Oh,
but
okay.
it just mythologically. Stats exist for it, but it's in Ravenloft 3.5.
Oh, okay. All right. Throw that in here at the bottom because I want to give the context of these six, and then I'm curious if it falls into like a blood drinker or a breath drinker and like
Okay.
where that could potentially fit. So in Pathfinder, there are 6 official subtypes of vampires. There used to be 5. They added the Vrikolakas, and then the Vitalarana replaced the Vitala. Um, there are other things that are like vampires. There's like a vampiric ooze or vampiric mist. That's what it is. It's not technically a vampire. It functions similarly in that it consumes blood, but it is technically an aberration. So these are, when I say official vampires, I mean things that get the vampire trait that have all of the basic stats of a vampire, which I'll get into on the next slide. But the first ones to ever exist were the Strigoi, the shadow vampires. These things are from the netherworld. So one of the interesting things about vampirism in Pathfinder is that they're not native to Golarion. They never were. They're not native to the material plane, period. The first vampires in Pathfinder came from the plane of shadow, which in Remaster is the netherworld, which is kind of the realm between the material plane and the negative energy plane, the void. So it has a lot of like the physics and temporalness of the material plane, but it's saturated in void energy. The Strigoi then came to Golarion. They were drawn there by something. It's not 100% clear what, but we'll get into that later. And they evolved, not necessarily individual Strigoi, but their strain of vampirism, like as an infection, so to speak, evolved over time. It evolved into 5 subtypes spread around Golarion, first of which is the Nosferatu, which are very much just Count Orlok. They're old, they're eternal. They have eternal life. They don't have eternal youth. They age, they rot, they decay. They're almost universally bald because all their hair fell out. They have these really long claws. They're deeply unpleasant. They're just Count Orlok. That's all it is.
I am a hunger.
Yeah, exactly. Then you have the Moroi, and these are, I mean, I don't want to call them the Twilight vampires, but this is what the this is what the Twilight vampires are very clearly based on. They're the sexy ones. They're young, they're hot. Like they can create Dampiers. Most vampires can't. Not through actual like what's the like physical procreation. Like these are the ones who can do that. That's why the vast majority of Dampiers are descended from the Moroi, assuming you're in Avestan. If you're in places where there aren't Moroi, obviously that's not true. But they're young, they're hot, they're they're the ones who are like the vampiric nobles in the fancy castles, all that kind of stuff.
They're Dracula.
Then there are these. Okay, these are the ones that are new to the lore. We don't really know their origins yet. I assume that they are more recent in terms of like when they actually evolved. But these are the Vrikolakas, which, like you mentioned, these are the ones based on Greek mythology. So they're very animalistic. They are associated with animals and the plague. They can like inhabit animal bodies when they need to, which is kind of interesting. That's not something that most of the other vampires can do. They can transform, but the Vrikolakas can like truly put their spirit into an animal's body to get a new corpse to puppet.
And if they die, don't they turn into a swarm of rats?
No, actually, that's the Nosferatu.
Oh, okay.
So we'll get into that. They all have different methods of not dying when they die.
Sorry, I don't mean to ruin your slides.
No, you're good. It's a good question. So the reason I did these three first is these three are the ones that show up in Avestan, which is where the vast majority of Pathfinder is played, assuming you play on Golarion. Like you always play in Avestan. Like 60 to 70% of the games are in Avestan. And these are the blood drinking vampires. Like one of the things that wasn't 100% clear in the lore is like there's actually a designation of blood drinkers and breath drinkers. The blood drinkers are the vampires who actually drink physical blood from their victims to get their life force. The other subcategory are the breath drinkers. These are ones who feed on either breath, like the actual air out of your lungs, which is kind of seen as a metaphor for your chi or your ki, and then the ones who consume your psyche. So the ones who like literally drain the thoughts out of your head. And the thought ones, the psychic vampires, are the Vitalarana, which are from Vudra, very clearly drawing on Indian folklore. I don't know any Indian folklore, so I can't tell you how accurate any of this stuff is.
They're specifically from a Hindu book that's 25 chapters, each a short story.
See, this is why I got you here, Jake. You know a lot more about this stuff than I do. And then over in Tiansha, we have the Jiangshi, which are the hopping vampires. They're the ones who like hop around because they have rigor mortis. They consume chi. They have the fulus, the like written script attached to their forehead. So they're pretty cool. And what's interesting is that this designation of blood drinkers and breath drinkers was made by Geb himself in the Book of the Dead. Like this is how he categorizes them in his taxonomy, which is kind of cool. And what's interesting is that then ties everything back to the Strigoi, because the Strigoi do both. They drain your blood and your essence, like your spirit, at the same time. So it's kind of cool that they tied all of it together kind of after the fact, it's just fun. And then obviously the one we're looking at here is a Moroi.
Can I interject real briefly, folklore-wise? Like, I might talk about this more later, depending on how things pan out with the slides. But if you are talking about what these origins are in folklore, the Strigoi you could basically think of as ghosts. Mm-hmm. The Morai are night hags. The mm-hmm. Vrikolakas are werewolves.
Mm-hmm. And that makes a ton of sense. Like you saying the Strigoi are ghosts is, you have no idea how close you've come to the actual lore here. Because in the shadow plane, they are just ghosts. Like they are just shadow spirits that have no physical body. They wouldn't have a physical body in our world, except the only way our world, I mean Golarion. They wouldn't have a physical body in Golarion, except the only way they can cross over is by being summoned into a corpse puppet. So just kind of interesting. But when we talk about like vampirism, I'm going to get into like specific abilities. Like I'll talk about major ones later, but I want to just start by like, what are the things that kind of define vampirism mechanically? Basically all of them get either dark vision or greater dark vision. Makes sense. They almost all have claws that also give them grab. The Vrikolakas are the only ones that don't get grab.
No.
They don't. I don't know. It's because they have rend instead, which makes sense. They're a little more animalistic. They all have void healing, obviously. They all have fast healing of some degree or another, although that just the degree to which they get that just depends on how strong they are. They're all immune to death effects, disease, paralysis, poison, and sleep. And then they all have some way of restoring their HP when they drop to 0. What that method is varies pretty significantly. And then like we were talking about earlier, all these specific vulnerabilities. Obviously, they all take vitality damage. Some of them have a weakness to it. Some of them are just take damage from it. And then they all have a revulsion, a thing that is very specific to their vampiric subtype, where if you brandish a holy symbol, they freak out. Or if you brandish a mirror in front of their face, they freak out and they experience fear with no saving throw. Some of them, the Moroi, can't cross running water. Like they just can't do it. They have to literally fly over it at a height of greater than 10 feet. And if you submerge them in running water, they die, like permanent destruction. So it's kind of cool. And then the other weaknesses that they have are very specific. There's not a lot of other shared weakness. Sunlight is most of them, but not all of them have like actual sunlight vulnerabilities. So um,
Did I
we
mention the Nosferatu thing while we were recording or not? The,
which
sun,
Nosferatu thing?
the sunlight thing.
Yeah, I think it was while we were recording. Yeah, I'm
Okay,
pretty sure.
cool. Never mind.
No, you're good. Uh, Now, where did vampirism come from on Golarion? So we know that the first like what you might consider as like a mortal vampire, like mortal, not immortal, a mortal vampire. The first ones were the Strigoi that came from the Shadow Plane. That's not really debated, but there are divine vampires that way predate them, which is kind of interesting. Like the gods of vampirism seem to predate the existence of the Strigoi, or at least the knowledge of the Strigoi. So like Zura claims to have been the first vampire to have risen from the grave. She's the demon lord of vampirism. She is like ancient Aslant pre-Earthfall old. So she's been around for
Whoa.
a while. But like she started basically a cannibal cult as a mortal and then died because, cannibal cult. Uh, And then she showed up in the Outer Rifts as like, oh, I'm a demon now. Guess I'm going to become a demon queen. And she did that. And she's like, hey, I was the first vampire to like rise from the grave. Ironically, not a thing that her mortal body actually did. So I'm not 100% sure if she's just
Interesting.
lying or like if there's a retcon there. What we do know is that another vampire deity, the other big one, Nin, at least is older than her. They trace their origins to at least the Age of Serpents, which is way earlier than Aslant, and might go back to like the Age of Creation. Essentially, it's not really clear. Nin is very secretive and doesn't talk about their past. And then Lorcan, who's this guy, he's an infernal duke. He's a Duke of Hell, a lesser deity in Hell. He claims to be number 3. He doesn't say who numbers 1 and 2 are. So we don't know like divinely what came first. The Strigoi, like if you look at the non-deities, the Strigois are obviously the first. If you look at the lore of the Whispering Way, which are like the big necromancers, they claim that they summoned the Strigoi to Golarion for the first time during the Age of Darkness, so after Earthfall. The problem is Sorshan had Strigoi servants in ancient Thassalon pre-Age of Darkness. So either the Whispering Way is wrong, or they're fudging with the dates, or they're just straight up lying.
Time travel. Time travel.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Time travel exists, especially in Thassalon. So, like, all of it could be true, all of it could be false, or everybody thinks they're telling the truth and they're all just wrong.
Can I interject here about the deities?
Yes, yes.
If you are looking for an Egyptian-style deity that is vampiric, it would be Sekhmet. She was she was commanded by Ra to go kill unbelievers, and she couldn't stop drinking their blood until he finally filled the Nile with ink that was based in alcohol, and she drank the whole river.
Nice. That is cool. Now see, there's a funny thing here because I didn't know that, but if you told me to guess the vampire or the deity that you could associate with vampires from Egyptian mythology, I would have guessed Sekhmet purely because it is a plot point in Castlevania Nocturne. So I highly recommend watching it because they do a bunch of fun stuff with it.
Wow.
Yeah,
They
they
got some
actually
shit
get pretty
right.
interesting with it. Like
Damn.
Sekhmet, they play with like the like revolution in France, the slave revolt in Haiti. Like they tie vampirism into a lot of real world history in that show, which is super
Interesting.
fun. So now we get to talk about my favorite aspect of vampires, which are the Dampiers, because Blade is awesome. Uh,
Yeah.
so Dampiers are just the offspring of mortals and vampires. I think most people who play the game probably know that. They don't necessarily have to have been born from intercourse or from like actual like a vampire is your father. If a vampire is possessing your father through like some spirit magic, that is usually enough to at least allow for the creation of a Dampier. That's particularly important for some of the vampires who just straight up can't conceive, like the Nosferatu can't naturally, like, they can't make new vampires and they can't usually conceive children. They don't have that ability. The what was I going to say? The Vitalarana, for instance, their whole thing is like mind control. They usually don't have intercourse. They usually like are possessing people, and either while those people are possessed or after the possession, there's enough lingering vampirism that their future children might be Dampiers. The birthing parent is almost always mortal because the vast majority of vampires don't have a fertile womb. Like they just literally can't give birth to a living or unliving thing.
Is they dead?
Because they did. Yeah, it's see Van Helsing from 2004 for why this is a problem. Also, just see that. It's a great movie.
It is a good movie.
It's so good. One of the interesting things, Dampiers might be more common if they didn't accidentally die in the womb all the time because they have a tendency to accidentally kill their mothers, which sucks,
Yeah.
but makes sense.
Hungry.
Yep. As far as like where they show up in the lore, like they're pretty easy to identify. Most types, they usually have some kind of physical trait that is kind of a dead giveaway. Like as you can see from our image here, not everybody wakes up with gray skin. Like this isn't normal, especially if you're an Ustalav. They know what to look for.
I'm choosing purple skin if I get a choice.
Yeah, that's a good choice. I like it. I'm thinking like a nice alabaster with like the marble lines in it. That could look kind of fun. Um, but they're, especially in like Avestan where vampires are treated with a ton of fear, like these clearly are feared, understandably. So most of them, get into the practice of vampire hunting, as we can see here. They actually are pretty good at usually pretty decent at becoming vampire slayers. They age very slowly. So like if you're a human who's a Dampier, you will live as long as an elf in most situations, which is pretty cool. Like they will live an extraordinarily long time. They are also void healers. So like a vampire who's a cleric can channel as much negative energy as they want, and it's not going to hurt a Dampier, which is pretty cool. And then of course depending on how you build your character, these are all the class feats that you can kind of build into. You can get fangs, which eventually let you lead into blood consumption, which is kind of fun. You get a degree of disease resistance. You can transform into mist or a bat, or if you're feeling particularly Alucardi, a wolf. And then eventually you get like inverted healing in sunlight. So if it's daytime, you can still heal from vitality, which is pretty
That's
sweet.
fascinating. That's cool.
Yeah, I really like that one. I don't know of like a film or anything that's done anything like that before, but also void and vitality is pretty Pathfinder specific, so that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know of any folklore that fits that.
Yeah. All right, and then I just want to highlight a couple hot spots of vampire. I'm kind of sliding or flipping through these slides pretty quick, but just a couple hot spots. I mean, some of these are pretty obvious. So like the Isle of Dread, where Tarbathon the Whispering Tyrant lives. A lot of vampires there, unsurprisingly. The Gravelands, makes sense. Ustalav, which is like your gothic horror part of the setting.
The most
Yep.
fun place.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, if the only AP that exists there has one book each for ghosts, Frankenstein's monster, werewolves, vampires, liches, and eldritch deities. So like all the fun stuff is happening in Ustalav. They would dispute that claim. Uh, and then over in Corvosa, you have some Strigoi. Not a lot, but like it's the only major concentration of them that I know of. So I did mark it here. Down in Garund, you do have the Undead Nation of Geb. Obviously, another fun place to party. All of them exist there except the Jiangxi and the Strigoi. Strigoi because they're new, Jiangxi because they're on literally the other side of the planet. But interestingly,
Oh,
the Vitalarana from Vudra do show up there because of the way like trade routes work in the region. They do sail all the way over from Pathfinder India, which is kind of cool.
what are in the Mwangi Expanse? What type?
Yeah, so the Mwangi Expanse. So the only vampires we know of in the Mwangi Expanse are from a pretty old 1E source book called Heart of the Jungle. A lot of the information there has been retconned because it was a little bit racist.
Oh, okay.
But the stuff about the vampires wasn't. I don't see anything super wrong with it. It appears to mostly be Moroi. Some of whom came. So there's this section called Vidrian that used to be a Chelish colony. Presumably, the Moroi, if they weren't like native to the region, would have been introduced through the colonial project of Cheliax, because there's a lot of vampires in Cheliax hiding among the nobility. And again, mostly Moroi, because they're the fancy ones. And then over in
Okay.
Tiansha,
Thank
I
you.
mean, we don't hear about them a lot, but the Jiangxi are over there. That's where they're from. My guess is that they're in Shenmen and Chuya. So Shenmen is basically this whole haunted forest kingdom that's ruled over by the Jorogumo, the spider ladies. And Chuya is this like cool forest kingdom that's ruled over by Oni, but some of the forests are actively controlled by the undead who hate the Oni. So presumably that's where the Jiangxi would like congregate. Essentially, those are the kingdoms where they would feel the most at home. They're very on brand for kind of the stories that are told there. But we don't have a ton of source books on the region, and none of them have really gone into where specifically the Jiangxi set up shop. This is just kind of my best guess. And then over in Aslant, you have a ton of Strigoi and some Moroi who are like looking for their ancient gods, looking for the old temples of Zura, looking for the old temples of Nin that were lost when Earthfall happened. So
I have to say something takes away from the terror of Nin. I just always hear "come poop" afterward.
I like it.
It's
Don't
me.
say that to their face. I have a video coming out on Nin. They're kind of a dick.
They're like, I'm Nin. Come poop.
Nin is one of the deities who's not afraid to smite people who irritate them, like just straight up. Most of the deities are restrained. Nin is not. Nin is like, no, you've pissed me off personally, so goodbye.
That fits the bloodlust.
Yeah, yeah.
We have 4 minutes left on this recording. I have
I
to pee.
think I can wrap up Gods of Vampirism in the 4 minutes. So
All right, go for
I
it.
think I can do it. So I am showing two holy symbols. The red skull with the fangs is Zura, the queen of vampires. The way vampirism is interpreted through Zura is consumption, exploitation, and tyranny. It's you are a rich noble, and your job is to consume everything. You are gluttonous. You consume the literal life force of the people beneath you, but also they're the ones you get all your money from. So double whammy. Nin has a lot of things that are similar in that they believe that vampires, and they specifically, are superior to all other beings, even other undead. And for that reason, they still have kind of that tyrannical worldview, but theirs is a lot more eugenicsy. They are really interested in breeding out the weaknesses that vampires have and basically making them into super vampires. So Nin is actually a really clever narrative tool because in the lore, vampires used to be weak to a lot of the things that folklore around the world claims that vampires are weak to that aren't reflected in the mechanics anymore. And Nin is the excuse for why that is. Nin and their followers have bred out weaknesses to specific things. Things like these are things that the lore specifically mentions. I don't know where the mythology comes from, but like apparently vampires in some real world mythology have like some hypnosis when they witness like the spiral of a pine cone or different things like that. And it's like, no, that makes sense why you wouldn't put that in the game rules, but why doesn't it exist? You know, like it's like, oh no, he just bred it out of all vampires.
That works. That works.
Yeah, or they just bred it out of all vampires. Yeah, like it was Nin is non-binary. So I'm trying really hard not to misgender the super ubermensch god of vampires. So Lorcan and Ruithvane are two lords of hell who like they basically share a subsection of hell that is like they are ruled over by Moloch, the lord of hell, like the general of hell's armies. We know almost nothing about them. They haven't been reprinted in Divine Mysteries, so I'm curious if they even still exist or if they got retconned out. But
Blank slate.
What was that?
Blank slate.
You can blank slate. You can kind of do whatever you want. The one thing we do know is that they don't like each other, which is very funny. Like they are effectively divine roommates, and they hate each other. All right, we got a minute left in this particular recording, so I'm gonna speed through these last ones. So obviously, vampires worship non-vampire specific deities. So like Zon Kuthan, the Midnight Lord, torture, pain, and darkness makes a lot of sense. Yep. Urgathoa, Pallid Princess, patron deity of all undeath, also gluttonous consumption. Yep, that tracks. Over in Tiansha, you've got Fumeyoshi and Yejing, Lord of Envy and Minister of Blood, coolest title, respectively. Yeah. Lord of Envy, you know, you envy the living. Minister of Blood, you inflict punishment on those who deserve it. Also, you operate mostly at night. And then Mahathala, the Dowager of Illusions, evil, undead illusionist. Yep, all of these track.
That fits.
All right, next recording.
I'm impressed. Good job.
Made it. All right, now we are finally getting to what most of my notes were on, the subcategories of vampires. Starting off with the Strigoi. The Strigoi were the first vampires, and as you can probably see from this picture, they are shadow-based. We only have two pictures for the Strigoi, but I really like the two that we got, even if the copies I can find are very low resolution. It's fine, Paizo. I'm not mad.
If in the future you're looking for vampires that have shadow, look up La Sombra online because they're from Vampire the Masquerade. They're shadow vampires.
See, this is the type of expertise that I brought you on for, Jake. So the Strigoi are the first vampires. And I'm not necessarily saying the first ones to ever exist if you count deities. I'm counting like the first like taxonomical vampire subspecies. They came from the Netherworld, so pre-remaster, the Shadow Plane. And they consume a combination of blood and life force. When they drain their victims, like the bite mark isn't just showing like loss of blood. Like they basically lose all their color. They start to get all wrinkly and dried out. Like they're truly ripping part of their soul out when they do that, which is cool. I really enjoy that. And one of the interesting quirks about them is like on the Shadow Plane, they are just like these shapeless shadow mist things. They don't really exist in physical bodies. So when they come over to Golarion, they need to have a physical body to go to. They need to be summoned into a body that will serve as a host. Now, they can temporarily exist outside of a host body with some of the abilities that I'll talk about in a minute, but like the way they are drawn, new ones are drawn in is by some dark occult ritual that summons them into a host body. Some of those are voluntary, other ones are sacrificial. Once they get into a host body, they transform them into what you see here. So like that host body loses all of its color. They essentially become black and white. They get these flowing shadows that come out of them. So like when they sprout wings, they start dripping shadow onto the ground. When they like their hair starts to kind of fade into shadow at the ends of it. They get these really long, like over exaggerated claws, and then their eyes just completely fade to black. So like they're pretty cool and visually distinct compared to other vampires. They look awesome.
I want one.
I know, they're so cool. So like here you could kind of see like clearly the claws have to be retractable, which is kind of interesting because otherwise you would be stabbing your hand whenever you grip something.
And how do you put your clothes on?
Exactly. But like you could see like that hair really like fades into like a wisp, which is it's a really nice visual. And like they do cast shadows, which is interesting. Not all vampires do that. But their shadows are very clearly not the shadow that their body would normally cast. Like it's a part of their manifestation.
The one vampire that I had in my group that I gave the archetype of vampire to, I chose Strigoi so he could take on shadow form so he could fly as a shadow.
Yep, that's exactly what they can do. Like right here, shadow form. This is a thing that they could do. So like as we go through vampire subtypes, I do intend to just kind of highlight the unique abilities for those the unique abilities and vulnerabilities for those vampires. So the excuse me, the Strigoi have like levitation. They can levitate just even at low level, but then they gain the ability to fly. And when they can fly, they sprout those shadow wings that this guy had.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, they can hover on their own, but once they gain the ability to fly, they get a lot more visually distinct. They drain essence, not just blood, which is interesting because like normally when you drain blood, it causes the drained condition. They also cause stupefied. So like if you get bit by these guys, you're getting hit a little bit harder, which is kind of cool. They do have coffin restoration. If they rest in a coffin, they restore 1 HP from 0 after an hour, at which point their fast healing kicks in. So like if they drop to 0 and something moves their body for them, then they can restore 1 HP and then fast healing kicks in and they come back. They do have a shadow form spell. There is no time limit on their shadow form. They can just do it forever. But there are some limitations. In sunlight, if they get slowed, and if they slow to a stop, they die, which is pretty cool. And then they are limited. They can only move along solid surfaces. So, like, they can't jump across gaps. They can't move across water. They can't move across. I don't think they can move across force. So, like, if you had a bridge made of force, I don't think that works. I'd have to go look that one up again.
I don't remember.
But then they also have this reaction that they can get called Shadow Escape, where if they drop to 0 HP, they can just go into Shadow, and then as long as they head back within 2 hours, make it to a coffin to kick in their coffin restoration. So like the vampiric mist ability is very clearly derived from this.
And remember that your bad guys can have multiple coffins.
Oh yeah, very much so. Yep. They do have the dominate and create servitor abilities. So like they have the hypnosis and then they can create like servitor vampires. Interestingly, most of the vampires can't do that. Only they and the Moroi can. Well, no, only they, the Moroi, and the Nosferatu can do that. There are other ones who can do something similar, but it doesn't work the same way, which is interesting.
Huh.
Yeah. And then they do have this cool ability called Domain of Dusk, which the coolest part about it is its name. It's just AoE void damage. Like it's AoE void damage, which I like. It's cool, but it's got a sick name, and I like that way more. Basically, they bring nearby shadows to life, essentially, and it attacks people in an AoE, which is fun. I mean, I'm picturing the. Did you ever watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood?
No.
Oh, okay. There's a guy that I won't spoil much because this is a cool reveal, but there's a dude who has shadow powers and they fight him in torchlight. So like all around them are just these living shadows that he can control. And yeah, it's really cool. But just like all vampires, they have some pretty specific vulnerabilities. If you hold a mirror up to them, now you have to like knowingly do it. You know, if they're in a room with a mirror, they will actively avoid it, but it won't cause them fear. But if you turn that mirror towards them, they just start running away. They are infused with fear and they have to flee. And then after a round, they can start making a will save to stop fleeing. The same thing happens with bright light. So like if you hit them with really bright light really suddenly, the same thing will happen.
Do they have a reflection?
I don't think they do. I know the Moroi don't, but it doesn't say if the Strigoi do or don't. Okay. I'm guessing they probably don't.
Yeah.
They are vulnerable to sunlight. It doesn't kill them. It on its own can't kill them if they're in a physical body. But they do immediately fall unconscious, which is very funny. Like, oh man, I forgot it was day and I stepped outside and now I'm unconscious and all of my physical resistance is gone.
See, now
Whoops.
that at least, that sunlight, unconscious and sunlight, that fits the original folklore of what a Strigoi is. They're
And
powerless
that
during the day, just not harmed.
Yep, yep, and that makes a ton of sense. And I like that they have this because it does make them pretty unique compared to the other ones where sunlight can just straight up kill them if they're not careful. They're also,
God damn it.
they're repulsed by water. So like the classic vampire thing of can't cross running water. I think that even shows up in like the Headless Horseman story, even though he's not a vampire, or maybe it's the bridge. But like I like this weakness. I think it's fun. Notably, they can fly over it as long as they're flying high enough. Uh, they can do that. So presumably, if you built a really tall bridge, they'd be okay.
And if you wanted to, you could expand on that. And in Ravenloft, third edition, the vampires that had water revulsion, water that touched them that was running,
Mhm.
they were treated like it was acid. So you could douse this
Oh.
vampire in running water and just be burning the hell out of them.
That's cool. And there is something similar. So the water revulsion is actually shared with the Moroi. And if you, I don't think it states it for the Strigoi, but I would run it the same way. If you dunk the Moroi in running water, like if you just submerge them in a river, they start just straight up dying. Like they can just
Oh,
be destroyed over time. I don't remember if it burns them like acid. I think it might attack their spirit, but like it just wipes them out eventually. So one of the ways to kill them. We don't know of it. Obviously, we don't have any other images of the Strigoi, so this is just a shadow plane. That's just what the plane of shadow looks like in Pathfinder. Um, like I said earlier, they do need to be summoned to Golarion via ritual. What's unique about their predation is that they do summon both. Yeah, I kind of already mentioned this, but they consume both blood and vital essence. So the bite marks of like if you're playing a vampire hunter, this is really cool because if you see a bite mark where the flesh is graying, you know you're fighting a Strigoi, which is really interesting. Like all the other the true blood drinkers don't do that, so you could tell pretty easily what you're going up against, which is pretty cool.
I didn't realize
Um,
there was that much detail in this. I don't think I read all the details of all of the subsects of vampires.
it's buried in a bunch of different sources. Like the problem is a lot of this is in rules text, so like you have to go find it, or
Okay.
like it's in the sidebars of the creature stat blocks. So yeah, it's buried in a bunch of different places.
I'm glad you're doing this. This is useful for me too.
I love it. This was super fun. This was really cool. And then one of the other interesting quirks about them is like they were considered like basically legendary on Golarion. Like it was thought that they still existed on the Shadow Plane because obviously they weren't all destroyed, but like the assumption was that they had been summoned to Golarion, had existed for a while, and then sometime after the Age of Darkness had died out, and just never really got summoned back in large numbers, because in large part, the other types of vampires were just better adapted for the specific regions that they kind of settled in. That's no longer the case. So, like in the Shadows at Sundown adventure, you find out that the vampires that Sorshan had working for her were Strigoi, which is pretty interesting. That conflicts with a lot of the lore surrounding when the Strigoi first showed up, which is kind of fun. Also, it's Sorshan. Love Sorshan. She's my favorite rune lord.
Of course you
Uh,
do. Yes.
yeah. And then also in Shades of Blood, the new AP from earlier this year, there are Strigoi in it. That's where actually a lot of this like monster stat block stuff came from.
And a
Um,
Sanguimancer that was very under. They didn't put enough effort into make them anything that's useful for an archetype.
okay. I gave it a once over, and just like most of the AP, I quickly looked at it and I was like, I don't want to talk about this yet. So I haven't gotten into it in detail, but I've heard that it was the Sanguimancer I've heard is just like, like it's fine.
It's just not going to get played. It needs to be expanded upon.
Yeah. Well, and it's got such a cool name and such a cool concept. So I
Yeah.
bet it will. Well, here's the thing. It's going to be by third party people for sure because it's just too
Yes.
cool. I would not be surprised if someone was like, "Oh, I'm making a blood kineticist and we're going to call that the Sanguimancer."
I actually made a blood based warlock and a blood based sorcerer in 5e, so it's probably me.
Yeah, there you go. See? You're good. I've been playing with the idea of making my own homebrew vampire campaign, and one of the things I want to do is make a specific vampire bloodline for sorcerers and then a blood mystery for oracles. If I were
Yeah!
to do that, because like
Blood
there should
mystery
be a
for
blood mystery.
oracles!
Yeah, there should be a blood
Yeah!
mystery.
Oh, that's cool. They could get the witch feat of reading entrails, but in blood instead.
Yeah. Oh, that would be cool. All right. So after every vampire subtype, I do want to briefly talk about the Dampiers that can be descended from specific types of vampires and like what's unique about them. Unfortunately, the first one is the Selrau, who are descended from the Strigoi, and we don't have a picture of what a Selrau looks like. We have a picture of a gnome who looks like he's got the bleaching, and I don't know what type of vampire he's supposed to be. So I didn't
picture
want
them
to.
as a cross between celery and a radish.
I see now. I'm picturing a VeggieTales vampire, and I would watch that
I'm an
episode of
eggplant
VeggieTales.
vampire.
Remember, kids, Zura loves you, and you are special.
The vampires who don't do anything.
So the Selrau are the off. Selrau are asparagus. The Selrau are the offspring of the Strigoi. They don't have like so. A lot of the Selrau have, or excuse me, a lot of the Dampiers have like colloquial names. So like a Nosferatu child might be called a Ancient Born. I call the Strigoi the Shadowborn. That isn't canon, but I think it's just what people would call them.
Yeah.
They usually can be born of either tradition or magic. So like if you're realistically like a shadow vampire in its shadow form isn't gonna conceive, but they could do some weird magic thing where they possess the body of either parent and probably still give birth to a Strigoi child. This isn't something the lore is getting into in detail, but just something to bear in mind, like from a narrative perspective. Like you could play with that in some interesting ways for like a character.
Can I jump there for a second about the Strigoi?
Yeah.
Okay, so folklore-wise, the Strigoi were always either a witch that was possessing the body of a dead family member, or it was the ghost of a dead family member who was repossessing their own body, or it could be that a person that was alive had at birth a sign that they were cursed, like have a collar over their face that's part of the amniotic sac, or have like there'd be a blood moon, or they'd be the seventh son of the seventh son, or seventh daughter of the seventh daughter, and they would be considered a Strigoi all their lives, and people would look upon them with suspicion until weird bad shit happened while they were still alive. Like they would blame them for plagues, or for cows not giving milk, or for bad weather, and they just would say that the Strigoi brought it to them, and then once they died, they would suspect that they would come back as an undead, so they would usually chop off the head when they die.
And that makes a lot of sense. I think so the chopping off a head thing that actually comes up with a different vampire subtype. But you could actually play into that pretty easily with the Strigoi or the Selrau. So like the Selrau, like they would be pretty easy to pick out as like, like they have a more colorless appearance. There's your physical trait that like draws attention. That's like, oh, you're a Strigoi, or you're a, if they're particularly learned community, they might actually know the term Selrau. But like you could easily do stuff like that, and especially with the way that the shadow possession works, like that is very clearly inspired by the lore. So I really like that they took it in a way where that's like you can see where they drew the inspiration, but they also went in their own direction. So that's cool.
Yeah, I'm glad it fits in the world still.
Yeah, super cool. Unfortunately, because the Selrau are relatively new and they're not that numerous, we don't know how they're treated. Presumably bad, but like we just don't know like what they are naturally good at. Presumably they're good at sneaking around at night, but that's most Dampiers, like it's hard to make an honest living out of that. So they're probably not living. Thought. Yeah. Yeah. They do get some bonuses against darkness, light, and shadow effects, which is pretty good if they want to become vampire hunters, actually, or vampire defenders. And then they do get to reduce the duration for dazzled or blinded. These are the, like, if you choose the Selrau, what is it?
Lineage.
Lineage. Thank you. If you choose the Selrau lineage, this is the stuff you can get. If you follow up on those feats. So Selrau, this is kind of how I'll do the Dampiers. Just cover the Strigo or cover the vampire and then cover their Dampier after that.
Cool. That makes sense.
Now we get to the ones I'm a little more familiar with. The Nosferatu. This is probably my favorite Nosferatu art because it is just so extra.
It is. Like, it looks like an old man, and then you realize it's a female.
Yep. It's just like
wow,
old. It's so great. I love that
you
the
are
art
not
that
human.
I love that the art they chose. They were like, no, make her an old lady. It's great. So these were the Nosferatu were the first ones to evolve on Golarion, and by evolve I mean like from vampirism. Like their version of vampirism was the first to kind of evolve from the Strigoi version. They got eternal life. They obviously did not get eternal youth. They continue to age. They continue to rot and decay over time. The best interpretation of this is obviously in the Nosferatu film from last year. The special effects on Orlok were great. So good. But they are blood drinkers, so they actually do drink physical blood. They lost the ability to drink the spirit of their victims. All the energy they need is gotten actually like from the physical blood itself. One of the other quirks about them is like the first ones were actually risen from plague victims. So like either they were infected with vampirism and then died coincidentally of the plague, or they died of the plague and a vampire then fed upon their corpse not long after that. Those corpses then rose and became the Nosferatus. At one point, it's implied that the Nosferatus could directly create new Nosferatus, but that is not the case anymore. They straight up can't make more of themselves by infecting living hosts. It's unclear if they can do it by infecting plague victims. That's not 100% known yet, but it's the way it's written. It implies that the number of Nosferatus in the world will only ever go down, short of extenuating circumstances, which is a really interesting like narrative point that you could play on if you have like a Nosferatu villain in a campaign.
A little sad.
Yeah, they are, I mean, you can tell from the picture, they get old, they start to rot and decay, their joints swell up because they have really bad arthritis. Their teeth start falling out. Like almost all of them are in so much pain because like, their body has fallen apart. They're 1,000 years old, and I start feeling crappy. I'm 30, and I wake up and feel miserable some mornings. So I can't imagine it gets better 1,000 years from now. They do have extremely prominent fangs and claws. They do seem to be retractable as well, which seems pretty consistent across vampire types, except maybe the Vrikolakas. They do start to lose their hair, although that appears to be that seems to have more to do with the fact that they're all just really old than anything else. It doesn't appear to be a symptom of the vampirism as much as just the age. And then they all have these really pointy ears. So even if you weren't an elf, you would end up with these pointy ears, which is kind of cool. They look very ghoul-like. They look a lot like the Pathfinder interpretation of ghouls.
They do, yeah.
They do have the drink blood ability. They do have the change shape. This is where your swarm of rats thing came in. So they kind of moved that from the Strigoi to the Nosferatus. I actually haven't seen the original Nosferatu movies. Is that a thing that Orlok can do in the original movie, or is he associated with rats?
Either.
Okay, all right. I just know it's in the new one. Because I don't think he could transform into rats, but he can control rats in the new one. So that maybe that's a piece of the Orlok lore that I just don't know that well. But when they have a unique coffin restoration, so when they die, they turn into rats. Their body decomposes into a rat swarm, and then they disperse. Cool. It's so cool. And if even one rat makes it back to the coffin, they transform back into the body. And they start regaining HP, and then their regeneration kicks in. They do have dominate. They do have command thrall. So like they can dominate they could dominate a person just like Orlok can do. He can hypnotize people and get them under his control. And then he can command them to do what he wants. And the only guaranteed way to break that is to kill the Nosferatu in question, which pretty consistent. I've seen that in a bunch of stuff. They also have this unique disease. I'll be honest, I don't know the disease rules very well. It seems nasty. It both enfeebles and drains you, which seems like it would be a pretty nasty combo.
Well, virulent means that anybody who comes into contact with that person also catches it.
Okay, yeah, nasty.
Yeah.
My instincts were right.
You're correct.
And then the vulnerabilities, again, the Moroi, the
Or
Nosferatu,
Dermer.
and the Strigoi all have pretty similar weaknesses,
Yes,
but there
sir.
are some distinct differences. The
Shit.
Nosferatu are the first ones that have the distinct
It's worse than
stake to the heart, which is kind of cool. Like the Strigoi, the stake to the heart didn't hurt them any more than it would hurt them normally. You know, like obviously getting stabbed in the heart is a bad thing, but it didn't like cause specific problems for the Strigoi. Whereas it does here, it shuts off their fast healing and allows for decapitation. Decapitation this is where you're like you had mentioned that earlier. This will take out a Nosferatu and prevent them from regenerating. Um, they
I would add
also, sorry,
I
go
would
ahead.
like to add folklore about the stake to the heart.
Yes, yes.
So there are graves in Romania and other places that show how stakes were used to prevent someone from coming back as a vampire, and in that case, it would have been a Moroi or a Strigoi, not a Vircolicus, that would be Prussia, but it wasn't staking the heart; it was staking them down with huge long poles to pin them to the ground.
Nice. So was it thought that it would prevent them from like raising from the dead, or was it
Yeah,
thought that it would literally stop them from getting out of the ground?
that it would literally stop them from getting out of the
That
ground. They
is
also sometimes
awesome. That
buried
is
them
so
upside down.
cool.
They also sometimes buried them upside down, so if they woke up, they would start digging deeper into the earth instead of up.
I love it. See, that makes sense. Yep, that makes a ton of sense. Because obviously they wouldn't understand how gravity works. And they
Right, I
wouldn't be like,
know.
wait a minute, this is way easier than it should be. This is also so the Nosferatu is also where we start seeing the garlic come in, which is kind of cool. I appreciate that they threw garlic in here. You'll notice like when they went from Moroi to Nosferatu, they ditched the mirror and they went to the brandished garlic. But the way the like revulsion works is still the fleeing. So, but kind of cool. I don't know anything about why garlic was thought that way. Do you happen to know that?
Yeah, I've heard different things. I gotta say that I think that it should be like in the Lost Boys. Like if a vampire touches or eats garlic, they also get burned. It should do something besides just I'm afraid of a bulb.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's supposed to be the garlic is well, it stays good for almost ever, so it has an
Hmm.
innate purity, and also folkloric remedies said that it's really good for cleaning blood, and so that specifically
Oh,
that purity of cleansing blood, it
huh.
probably had an association there.
That's fascinating. You actually reminded me of one of the. So I was talking about the weaknesses, the vampiric weaknesses that Nin and their followers had purged from vampirism. Another one was lavender, which, if I remember right, lavender flower has some kind of association with like either purity or warding off vampires specifically. I don't. Do you know anything about that?
It increases calm and peace. It smells good. I
Yeah.
don't know. It can hamper testosterone production. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean,
There was
I'm
a
not
lot of
making shit
lavender in
up,
the new
but I don't know
Nosferatu
anything
movie, so
else.
there's probably something there.
Pretty.
Yeah, it's real pretty.
Oh, rosemary is supposed to prevent unwanted intruders. Lavender, I don't know.
See, all I know about rosemary is it makes my porchetta taste really, really
It
good.
totally does. And lamb.
Oh yeah, it is really good on lamb. So Nosferatu society, it's obviously quite miserable because they keep aging and getting older and falling apart. They are almost universally driven almost mad by the fact that they will live forever and they will watch themselves slowly fall apart for all time. And this isn't a fate that they really have any way to escape. They pretty much all start to hate themselves at one point or another, and that drives them to almost always working alone. Now, that's not to say that they won't have people that they visit or collaborate with on from time to time, but they'll pretty much always go back to working alone and then just kind of make reports to collaborators whenever they need to.
Well, seeing
Um,
others of their kind would probably remind them how miserable they are.
Very much so. Yes, this is the other reason. This is another reason. Like most vampires can kind of stand being around one another. The Nosferatus are one that absolutely can't because every time they look at, it's the closest thing they can get to looking in a mirror and realizing how horrifying they are is by looking at another Nosferatu. They are almost always interested in ending their misery. Now, some of them, this ends up being like basically suicidal, but a lot of other ones are actually actively seeking to cure their vampirism. either by transforming themselves into some other kind of vampire, or by just being like, no, I want to be a human again. Like, I don't want to be a vampire. Either this was forced upon me, or I regret my decision. They want to fix it. So like, these are the ones who you could potentially see like helping the heroes develop a cure for vampirism. But
Sure.
you could also see them working with Nin of like, no, this is a vampiric weakness that I want to purge out of myself
Sure.
and
I see
fix
that. That makes sense.
myself. Yeah. So
I could also see one becoming like a Lepidstadt surgeon to learn the crafting of a corpse into a construct to assist their own body. Like I see one having
yes.
plates of metal with bolts and staples in their own body to
Hmm.
keep themselves together.
Yes. Super easy way to like incorporate some Frankenstein into your Dracula and have it feel very cohesive. Or make it an action movie with like Van Helsing. It still worked. It was great.
Yeah.
We had Dracula pro wrestling we had Frankenstein's monster pro wrestle fighting one of Dracula's wives. It was awesome.
Yeah, that was shocking. And then how the hell did werewolves get that was just surprising too.
But cool.
Yeah. I just realized I might be giving something away. I don't want to. It's cool.
I mean, the werewolf shows up in like the opening scene with
Oh, good point. Yeah.
the lady. So not really a spoiler.
No. That it's a great monster mashup movie.
Oh, it's so good. So good. So the only other thing I want to mention about the Nosferatu is like they are both like scientists usually because they've lived so long they just have a tendency to learn things, but also they are extremely animalistic when they need to be. They have a tendency to kind of swing between the two extremes. They can be really cold and calm and intellectual at like one time, and then the minute something goes wrong or somebody says something that sets them off, they just become these like raving, not lunatics, but really like furious, shouting, screaming, smashing things, like hyper violent. And then that kind of swings back to the cold intellect, which I just thought was kind of interesting. I've seen that in a couple different vampire movies, not necessarily with Nosferatu looking vampires, but just, makes sense.
Yeah, your psyche probably cracks after 300 years.
Oh, absolutely. So then we get to the Straveka, which I don't know if they made up that word. Do you know that word at all?
I couldn't find it anywhere except Pathfinder.
Okay. So they probably made this one up, but they're the offspring of the Nosferatu. They are sometimes called the Ancient Born. That's kind of the in-universe kind of slang term for them. I think it seems like the Nosferatu can conceive with mortals. It doesn't seem like that's something most mortals would be into, given how horrible they are. So a lot of this comes down to like either magical or like medical experimentation. This is like there tends to be a lot more science and magic involved in the conception of a Straveka than there are in some of the other vampire subtypes, which is just kind of an interesting quirk, especially given that a lot of the Straveka get into kind of this really analytical worldview. They get kind of the ability to sense the motives of others. They're really good at discerning lies. They're also really good at lying and kind of social manipulation. So they tend to gravitate toward kind of those interpersonal kind of thing, those interpersonal jobs that give them kind of this more calculating worldview, similar to their progenitors, which is kind of interesting. They look like, I don't want to say Benjamin Button-y, but not unlike Benjamin Button. um, they always look old, they always look pale, and they've always got really papery skin, even when they're little kids. So they're very distinctive. They also, tend to get these really like slightly pointy ears, kind of like what you might see on a half elf, very reminiscent of their vampiric progenitor. They also wound very easily. They're when they get scratched, it tends to scar rather than heal really cleanly. When they get hit, they bruise super easily. So a lot of that like decaying flesh where it's like, no, they're still alive and their body will still repair itself, but it's way more vulnerable to that type of stuff. Notably,
like
that's
the shittiest kind of vampirism.
I know it sucks. Notably, though, this isn't a mechanic. Like this isn't like your character doesn't take extra damage or anything. This is just a quirk. they are all, they're very easy to pick out, so they're usually feared. Makes sense. They look a lot like a Nosferatu. Um, so just like their parents, they tend to work alone. In Ustalav, in places like Ustalav, they can make a name for themselves. But that's just because there's so many Dampirs in Ustalav. Like they've kind of, you go to the major cities and they've kind of figured out how to incorporate these people into a semblance of normal life. Whereas out in the little villages, they would still burn them at the stake.
I want to say something about the Straveka Svatoker. Um, Another one that I can't remember the name of right now for some reason. Jesus, what was it? We just talked about it. Strigoi and Dampirs. Very weird. Okay, so like the Svatoker, which we will talk about eventually, that is in these slides, right? Okay.
Yeah, they're in the next set.
Okay. And that is a translation of Dampir, which Straveka is part of, is one of the Dampirs. And the Strigoi have a legend of creating a Strigoi or a Moroi of an already vampire husband having passions that cannot be quenched with death. And so he goes home and has sex with his wife, and then is born a sort of corpse-like vampire, like this Nosferatu ancient-born Straveka. So it's like folklore sort of got skipped over to the Nosferatu to make it make more sense with the kind of creature that they already seem like.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I hadn't heard that one before. That's interesting. I really like that it seems like they're playing fast and loose in a way that still feels respectful to the lore while also being very like, no, we're going to make this our own thing. Like,
yeah, they're making it make more sense in system.
Yeah, which it makes sense. This is, they're trying to make it feel like a cohesive whole, whereas clearly the peasants scattered around Europe 1,000 years ago weren't like, wait, we're not internally consistent with our folklore beliefs.
Exactly. It has annoyed me trying to research a couple of years ago the origin of witches, because they used the same witch to mean troll, witch, fae, or outsider. Just somebody who lives outside the village is a troll.
Yeah. Yeah. We have this word that means the weird guys over there.
Right. Not helpful, people.
Yeah, come on. All right, time for the sexy vampires, the Moroi.
That's a good image.
Right? Yeah. I tried to find Pathfinder images only for all of these vampires, and this one is definitely my favorite for the Moroi.
Yeah. Just goth dress.
So the Moroi were the second ones to evolve on Golarion. It's unclear if like their strain evolved directly from the Strigoi, or if it evolved from the Nosferatu, or from some cross contamination between the two. It's not 100% clear. One thing that is very clear is that they almost universally view themselves as a direct improvement on the Strigoi, because they don't look and feel like shit, which, like, fair enough.
You mean on the Nosferatu?
Yeah, sorry, the Nosferatu. I meant the Nosferatu.
Yeah, that seems like an improvement to me.
Yep. Yeah, I know which one I would pick.
Yeah.
Just given the choice between the two. They do also consume blood, so another kind of link between them and Nosferatu. When we get to strengths and weaknesses, like, they have a lot of the same weaknesses as the Nosferatu do. So they seem to be very closely related genetically. They are turned from living bodies. So, like, there's no association with plague. There's no association with, like, possessions necessarily. It's what we think of when you think of a vampire. You get your blood drained by a vampire, you turn into a vampire. That's how this works. So pretty basic stuff. When you look, interestingly, like, this is what Pathfinder considers a vampire. When you, like, look up the generic term, if you look up a vampire stat block, this is what you get, is a Moroi. They consider this the base from a mechanics perspective.
Okay.
Yeah, everything else is like, okay, you're a vampire, but these are your other like things that are different from the baseline. So kind of cool. The reason they do that is because, like, I mean, obviously it's probably because like this is what you think of when you think of like Castlevania or Helsing or stuff like
Or
that.
Blade.
Or Blade, like this is how they work. But also because in lore, these are the vampires who are the most common. And the reason
Okay.
for that is these are the ones who can create more vampires most easily. Nosferatu can't make more Nosferatu. The Vrikolakas are too animalistic to like actually plan in really long-term thinking. The Moroi are basically just regular people. So it's
They can
really
blend
easy
in
for them
too.
to just make more.
They can also blend in well.
Exactly, exactly. So like they have eternal youth. They're supernaturally beautiful. Like obviously their skin smooths out. Their hair always looks great. They're movie star vampires, you know. Like they're the vampires from Interview with a Vampire. They're all played by guys like Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise. You know, they do have distinctively like intense eyes, because like some of their like vampiric domination abilities, even when they're not active, would still be kind of not mechanically passive, but you get the inkling when you're looking at them that their eyes are like super intense.
That's cool.
Um, One of the interesting things that I've seen is like all the moroi that you see are kind of, I'm just scanning through pictures here, like they're all what we would consider like classically beautiful. I
Mhm.
would be really interested to see if the beauty standards have any impact on like how they like what their transformation does to them. Like obviously the vampires that we draw nowadays are all really skinny, and if they're the women they're really busty, and you know it's like okay, that's because that's our beauty standard. Like do the moroi in different parts of the world look different, you know, because the what is considered beautiful is different. So just
Yeah, like
some
in ancient
question.
Greece, the women would have really big bodies.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm very curious. Obviously, this is a question that Paizo's going to answer because why would
No, but
they?
it makes
But like,
perfect sense. It
yeah,
would fit whatever culture because that the people in that culture that would be looking for more moroi would be exemplifying beauty in whatever that culture exemplifies in general. So they'd be
mhm,
looking for people that fit that beauty standard.
exactly. So something to think about. Like if you were to set a moroi in a different part of the world, like that could be a fun way to play with the idea of what your players might be seeing. They Yeah,
Something
go
I
ahead.
wanted to include that was written by P.N. Elrod. She's a really fun novelist, but she also wrote a couple of Ravenloft novels, the first couple. Um, Something I like the idea of is if somebody becomes a vampire, their internal organs shrivel and die because they don't need them anymore, so they
Hmm.
all slim down.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Never thought of it that way, but that makes a ton of sense.
yeah.
Great excuse for skinny hot vampires.
Thank you.
So, like physiologically, they also have like prominent fangs and claws. Again, they do appear to be at least semi-retractable. Helps you blend in. I've seen ones where they have pointed ears. I've also seen ones where they don't. It's not clear if they're like half elves where they would have had pointed ears anyway. I assume that there's some flexibility there. Um, I don't know.
We could do
Uh,
the Ravenloft thing where if it was a curse, your ears are pointed, and if it's not a curse and it's just biological, they're not pointed.
oh, I wasn't familiar with that part of
Just an
Ravenloft lore.
option.
I like that. That's cool. So when we get to the Moroi, a lot of their abilities are very similar to what you see with the Nosferatu. There's clearly a lot that was like post retcon of this Rigoi existing. Clearly, like it's like, oh, the shadow escape evolved into the mist escape ability. So they drink blood. They do maintain the climb speed that you see in Dracula. They do have a mist form now instead of a shadow form. That then goes into a mist escape, which allows them to, when they drop to 0 hit points, turn into mist and go back to their coffin for their coffin restoration. Basically, they go back to their coffin after an hour. They get a hit point back. They do have the change shape ability. This is where the vampires start turning into bats. It does say like standard is a bat, but the monster stats for like, hey, how do you create a vampire as a unique creature for your players to fight? You can pick other things. So like standard is a bat, but you can pick a wolf, you can pick a rat. They use those as their examples, but they're like any nocturnal creature is considered acceptable. So cool for some variety's sake. They do have the dominate ability again, just like with the Nosferatu.
Oh,
The
can I
only
jump in because I
Yeah, go
forgot
ahead.
something? The
Mhm.
Strigoi originally, the Strigoi was thought to be able to change into an owl because they were the spirits of witches who were affiliated with owls, the night flares of that region. So
Mhm.
it was originally not bats, but owls that vampires turned into.
That's interesting. Hmm. That's cool. I didn't know that. Old folklore is so interesting because it's like the things that they associated with fear are so completely different with what is so cemented for us.
Right, like a knock on the door. Oh my God, it's a vampire.
hmm We're like, oh, someone's here to see me.
Or someone dropped off a package. Go away.
Yeah, yep, exactly. To be fair, I think they would have also said go away. It just would have been much more urgent. So the other thing that I want to highlight here is that the Moroi are the only ones who can reliably create other vampires who are their direct servitors, who have to do what they say.
Oh,
This is not a thing that any of the other vampires can reliably do without getting into like magic rituals that aren't necessarily associated with them being vampires. So like they're the only ones who can create a whole vampire hierarchy beneath them, similar to like what
wow.
you would see in Underworld. But there's even like a hint of like mind control in there. I'll get into this in a minute, but like they are really careful about this ability so that they don't overnumber themselves and become a serious resource constraint. They do have some unique vulnerabilities. They do have the brandished garlic or the holy symbol, just like a Nosferatu. Stake to the heart still gets these guys. Sunlight, again, they start with slowed 1, and then every round the slowed increases. If you get to slowed 4, you die permanently. Mist escape will not get you out of that. They do also have a unique compulsion. So they, like the Strigoi, have the running water. Other ones that the game suggests as an option would be like needing to be invited into the home in order to enter. The in-lore reason for this is because the Strigoi cannot enter a person's body unless they are
Ah,
invited the first
okay.
time.
That makes
This is
sense.
a derivation of that.
That makes sense.
The game also gives the example of if you want to create a vampire pirate, not being able to cross running water is going to be a problem. Instead, make it like Davy Jones to where they can't go on physical land. So the game
Okay.
actively encourages you to come up with like some unique compulsions because weird psychological compulsions is part of what defines vampirism in Pathfinder. Like
Mhm.
Geb himself talks about this. He's like, this is one of the reasons why vampires thinking they're the best is bullshit. Also, I'm a ghost and clearly we are the best. Geb is humble.
Oh yeah.
So the Moroi Society is a lot like what you would see in show. Well, it's like Blade. It's like what you would see in like Castlevania, or I'm assuming parts of Vampire the Masquerade. Again, haven't played.
And this
Where
is also what most of the current real world vampire network people, the houses, this is how they act.
mhm. Yeah, like they're they have houses, they have kind of a structure, they have a society that they've built up. This is vampire families and vampire bloodlines and vampire nobles. This is where Pathfinder's like, yeah, just indulge in all of that stuff, like, so like they see themselves as the best of the best. They're the young ones, they're the hot ones, they don't have the decaying flesh, and they're the inheritors of vampirism since the Strigoi aren't around anymore. They really like focus on kind of this elitist image, supported by the fact that they live forever. They have a chance to accumulate tons of resources, so they dress nice. They have big houses. They've got a ton of money. They have servants, but their arrogance is usually their downfall because this is fiction and that's how that works. Uh,
Yeah.
but they do tend to be taken down by the fact that they think that they're better than they actually are. They try to emulate kind of this noble vampire lord or lady kind of world or lifestyle. They become wealthier. They do the Dracula thing. They become wealthy aristocrats. They have fancy houses. They have living servants who work for them, either knowingly or unknowingly. They watch over their servitors to make sure they don't have too many mouths to feed, or too much infighting that could potentially cause a serious problem or draw speculation about what they actually are. They are also I don't want to call them lazy, but they don't do a lot of hunting on their own. They tend to just have food brought to them because like they're not going to debase themselves by hunting like an animal. um which is, it's interesting. I think it makes them even more like villainous, but it's a
Yeah,
cool
it's like the
story.
ruling council in Twilight.
Yes, exactly. Yep, exactly. Hang on. Do I remember this word? What was it called? Volturi. Got it.
Yeah, I'm like something Ari.
Yep, I am both proud and ashamed that I remembered that. Uh, one of the other cool quirks about them is because they're nobles, they have noble etiquette. They have this very well-defined rule system around manners, propriety, etiquette, behavior that because of the way their social standing works, they need to obey this because of their own pride. So like what's interesting is like if your players know about that, if you're playing vampire hunters or thaumaturges or investigators, like it would be very easy to exploit this to get some face-to-face time with your vampire villain, like, and as a GM, I'm like, oh, good, a chance for me to monologue. Thank you. Uh, what I've
Vampires
always
are really
wanted.
fun for GMs.
Oh, they're so much fun. These are the ones you want a GM for. They're the most fun. Like I can be my fancy self, and also a bad guy. So it's cool. Like so, they grant audiences to people. They use their powers. They like to go away from public when they do their vampire shenanigans. It's considered impolite to drain someone's blood in public. Also dangerous. But like when they kill a victim, these are the vampires who are like, oh, it's impolite for me to just leave them here. Let me arrange them so they'll be comfortable in their death. So it's just it. I like it. It's quirky. It's fun. It's weird.
They seem to have some sort of mental disorder.
Oh yeah, they've got. I mean, they're arrogant. They're extreme. They're so full of themselves. It's wonderful.
Narcissists. That's what I was trying to
Narcissists,
say.
yes. Then we get to the. You would pronounce it Svetoker. I would pronounce it Svetocher, but that's because I don't know how Eastern European is pronounced.
I don't know how this specifically be pronounced either. Not really.
Yeah, so these are the offspring of the Moroi. They don't really have a colloquial name because I think they would just be called Dampiers because they are like, especially in Avestan, these are what people mean when they say Dampier. Like if you see an ancient born, you're like, oh, that's the offspring of a Nosferatu specifically. If they just say Dampier, they mean the Svetocher. These are the ones who, because the Moroi they can impregnate humans, they most often are born of traditional conception. Also, the Moroi are hot, so that's much easier to happen than it is with the Nosferatus. Because of that, and because they're descended from vampires that look basically normal, the Svetochers are the ones who can blend in pretty easily. Like they're supernaturally attractive, but not so much so that it would necessarily draw suspicion. The only other kind of quirk is that they have pale skin, but it's Ustalav. It's always nighttime. Like everyone's pale.
Nobody goes sunbathing.
This is based on Transylvania. There's no sun. It's always cloudy.
I love their eyes. They're just like white.
Yeah, that's actually a cool thing about vampire lore is that all I didn't mention this earlier. So all Dampiers have these really washed out eyes. For both their irises and their pupils. So like certain ones, it's particularly pronounced when we get to the Rushi. They are the offspring of the Jiangqi. They are very pale-eyed, but most vampires have like these really washed out irises, and even their pupils are more gray than they are black, which is pretty cool. I don't know if that's a folklore thing or if that's a Pathfinder thing, but it's really cool.
Usually it was blue-eyed, red-haired people.
Interesting. All right. Well, I'm safe. So because the Moroi are able to blend in a little bit better, they usually function a lot better in society than most of the other Dampiers. Also, they tend to come from noble families because the Moroi, or excuse me, yeah, the Moroi often will, they wouldn't debase themselves by having a child with a poor person. So like a lot of Svetocher Dampiers tend to be born among noble or at least rich families. People who have resources, people who are, able to either raise this child as their own, as like a hidden away bastard, or people who can have the resources to go into the village, give this child to somebody else and say, this is yours now. It's not mine. You know, don't worry, not mine. Don't worry about it. Not going to talk about this. Um, the Svetochers do have like this natural charisma. If you pick their lineage feat, you do get bonuses to diplomacy, and then you're better at fortitude saves when drained, which I think that one's really cool. But so naturally, they've got the kind of this bonus to diplomacy that combined with their natural good looks, like they tend to rely on social manipulation to make their way in the world. They get to be really good at talking with people. This is your Alucard, you know,
This
all the
feels like
fun
a
stuff.
this feels like a natural seeming vampire.
Yeah,
Like this could happen.
very traditional in terms of like pop culture, not in terms of
Mhm.
folklore, but very pop culture vampire, half vampire. This is Blade, you know.
Yeah.
Now we're getting to
I
the
want to hear
ones.
about the Vitalas.
Yeah, so the Vitalas and the Vitalaranas. So I need to do a little bit of backstory here, like mechanical, like meta backstory. So in first edition, we had the Vitalas, which were basically undead spirits of children who died, like before their time, and they like leached onto the bodies of other people, and like they drained them of their life experiences. And then because they were puppeting these grown-up bodies and had all this incredible undead power, they could, you know, they could interact with the world again. But they would always have the minds of children, forever. Like they were unable to mature.
I see why they changed it. That's creepy as hell.
Yeah, they changed it. Now I don't know. I think they changed it for the better because I like the Vitalarana a lot. I don't know if they changed it because the undead child thing was a little disturbing, and Pathfinder 2e is definitely trying to be a lot less edgy than 1e was. I also don't know if there's a sensitivity concern because it's possible that Vitala to the way Vitala Rana, it's possible that they're being more in line with the folklore. I don't know enough about Indian folklore to know for sure, but when I'm reading Vitala Rana versus Vitala, it feels like the Vitala Rana is way more grounded in a folklore that could exist, whereas Vitala felt, I don't know. It just felt less mature, but I don't know where that's coming from. So it's just my gut reading as someone who doesn't know any of the folklore.
Well, what you're talking about, that's the Vitala. That okay, so the real world folklore is the name of Vitala, not Vitala Rana. I don't know
Hmm.
why they added Rana specifically, but
Hmm.
obviously to differentiate it from PF1. But I can tell you that the children memory thing
Hmm.
that actually happened in Ravenloft, but I don't know of any folklore that
Mm.
would fit that with Vitala or Vitala Rana or anything in Hindu mysticism that it includes children sucking brain juice out of people.
Yeah, that's not something I know. Uh, they do have, so the Vitalarana are different because these are the psychic vampires. They drain minds. You know, they consume memories, they consume emotions, and they consume experience. So like these were the third ones to show up. I think they were all, I'm pretty sure they evolved directly from the Strigoi. The way they were originally derived is they were people with like psychic or occult abilities. They call out specifically psychics. I don't know if they're referring to psychic as a general term or psychic as a class. I'm
I can
guessing
tell you that
general
in
term.
folklore, it's about predicting the future, so it was the general term.
Yeah, that's my guess. As like these people who died and whose spirits were unable to accept their own death, then transformed into the first Vitalarana, and presumably this is how they are still created to this day. The Vitalarana don't have like a blood drain ability. They can like recreate themselves or like new Vitalarana, but it doesn't happen through like a blood drain. I'll get to how that happens in just a minute, but basically like it has to do with turning their victims into like a comatose corpse whose experiences have all been drained. Those people can then turn under specific circumstances. So the Vitalarana are they're the ones that look the most human, well, except for maybe the Moroi, if you don't count supernatural beauty, or if you count supernatural beauty as like a problem. But like, if you put a hat on this guy, he looks pretty normal,
He
you
needs a
know.
hat.
The dead giveaway is the giant head. But aside from that, they look mostly normal. Uh, the host bot. So the first thing we have to talk about is the Vitalarana itself is not the body. It is the spirit that is stapled on to that body. When a Vitalarana rises for the first time, their spirit and their body are separated, and then the spirit is shoved back into the body to puppet it like a puppet. You're basically piloting a flesh mech at that point of your own body.
As
You
we all
can
do
then
anyway.
What was that?
As we all do anyway.
I mean, yeah. It depends on your metaphysical interpretation, but that's basically how you can think about it. But for them, it's extremely literal. So like they can pick up other host bodies. They can do that. But like most of the time, they're piloting their original body, unless they've been alive for like a crazy long time. They feed upon the thoughts and memories of their victims, and because of this, their skulls tend to grow as they get more stuff than their brain can fit. They do have claws. They do have elongated fingers. These claws may be retractable. I don't know. You never see them wielding weapons, so it's hard to say. But they're not as ridiculously cartoonish as some of the other vampires get. So these ones I could see just being like how their bodies work. I don't know why in this artwork they have ears hanging from hooks. That is not something that I know anything about. Uh,
I want
is
to know
that,
why they have piercings in their skull.
yeah, I don't know what that is either. That has not been explained anywhere in the lore yet.
Are you serious? But that's not helpful then. She's like, it's staples. She doesn't know anything about this.
Yes, the ancient Indian folklore revolving around staplers.
Revolving around staplers.
So the they have some distinct similarities, but a lot of their stuff is really unique because they're the psychic vampires. The way their physiology works is really different. They do have a climb speed like other vampires, which makes sense. They can't, I mean, if they can fly, it's because they're psychics. It's not because they're vampires. They do have thought sense as their way to see. Which is a precise sense out to 100 feet. So like, darkness, like walls, none of that stuff matters. If you're within 100 feet of them and you think, they can see you.
Funny thing is they can't see zombies.
Yeah, it's exactly like if you're mindless or if you have like a golem or something, it's like, yeah, no, that's how you kill these guys. Like, what'd you do? Well, I built an adamantium golem and I had it tackle the Vitalarana, and that's how I won. It's very simple. Now, building the golem, that was a challenge. Instead of drain blood, they have drain thoughts. It functions extremely similarly. It just causes the stupefied condition instead of the drained condition. They do still have to grab you in order to do it. Like they have to be in close physical contact with you. So like from a mechanical standpoint, the setup is the same as like a blood drain ability. You just drain thoughts instead. If you get your victim to so you cause stupefied, which heals after, I think, a week. If you cause stupefied 5 by feeding on them 5 times in relatively quick succession, then they fall into a coma and they essentially become like a living, it's a comatose body. It won't, as far as I know, they don't need to be fed because they're just sustained by magic, but like these bodies just sit there. And that comatose state will only end reliably, obviously magic exists, when the Vitalarana is destroyed. Now, this is where new Vitalarana can come in. If you do that, these people could potentially rise as new Vitalarana as their body slowly transforms with this vampiric power that's still like latent within them. So that's how they can kind of reproduce themselves. Their rebirth ability is this one's the one where I'm like, oh, these guys would be a huge pain in the ass to fight. Their mind just transfers to one of their comatose victims as long as they're within a mile. That undead body then transforms after 6 days into a new undead body. And there is no limit to the number of times they can do this. As long as they can make comatose victims, which they can scatter all over the place, you can't stop this. There are workarounds, but they're kind of tricky.
Does it have to be humanoid?
It doesn't say.
Okay.
It doesn't say it living being, but it doesn't say humanoid. So I don't think I think they have to have. I would rule it that they have to have thoughts. Like it can't be an animal.
Okay.
They would have to have like human or like sentient being style emotions and stuff, and that you'd be able to connect with. Otherwise, I don't think it would work. But like, what's interesting is that these could theoretically prey upon things like androids, whereas blood drinkers couldn't.
Good point.
So I don't know, maybe.
That's
Um,
interesting.
yeah. So where they are vulnerable is this is where you get kind of the fun stuff. So their revulsion is way easier to implement because you don't have to have some, you have to know how to do it, but you don't need to be carrying a specific object. If you just start spilling secrets, it terrifies them because their whole thing is like hoarding secret knowledge, and the act of just willingly sharing secrets with no concern for who hears them is so anathema to their very existence that it terrifies them to their core. So if you know to do that, you could make them run away.
Wow.
They also have a distinct weakness, a blind spot, like an actual literal blind spot. Cold iron, they can't see through it. If you put them in a cold iron box, they are blind.
Okay.
And similarly, force, like wall of force or force cage, they're stuck. So, like,
Makes
if you put
sense.
them in a force cage and then kill them, they can't use their mental rebirth.
Okay.
And then the really easy one, they've got zombieitis. If you destroy their brain, they're
Obvious.
dead.
They
So
have
like
inflammation of
if
the
you
zombie.
shoot them in the head, and that's the thing that drops them, I would rule that they are dead.
Yeah.
Like if you took what's that? It's like targeted shot or something that the gunslinger gets where you can specifically call out shooting in the head. I'd be like, nah, I don't care. I don't
Yeah.
care what item you're wielding, they're dead if you
I
hit
think
them
it's
with
supposed to
that.
call it stupefied or something silly. It doesn't
Yeah, I'd be
actually
like, no, that
do
dropped
extra
them to
damage.
zero, they're dead. So
There's also a Starfinder 1 power that lets you crush someone's head.
oh, see, I like that. That's cool. The Vitalarana, this is much closer to kind of what I think it feels much closer to what you were kind of going for, that high risk, high reward, because they seem like they're quite a bit stronger, but their weaknesses are way worse.
Yeah, they are.
Or less, at least easier to exploit if you know how to do it.
Very.
Yeah. So you ain't seen nothing yet. The Jiangxi got really screwed by that. Their weakness is really stupid.
I
From a mechanics perspective.
I don't
I
know how
get
I
why it
don't
is
know
the
all of these things. I guess I haven't read the monster manuals for pleasure. I've just been doing videos on them and stuff.
well, again, though, these are buried. Like the Vitalarana stuff all comes from Book of the Dead. Like it's only
Oh.
there. You don't if you didn't read their stat block and like all the side stuff, it's not in the monster manual.
Oh,
So
okay. Yeah, I did not. Oh, I want to point out that the Vitala was supposed to be just a spirit that's restless,
mhm.
period. And it gains the ability to leave its body and hop into any other body at will. So it just freely jumps to different bodies, different
Oof.
corpses.
And
And
see, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, sorry,
yeah,
continue.
because it's a spirit.
Yeah.
And because it is separated from life, it's separated from current time and spatial concerns. That's how it can see the future. That's how it's a psychic, because it exists in all time and no time.
Oh. That makes sense. Yeah, almost like how Merlin can see the future because he's already lived it because
Yeah.
he ages backwards. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Cool. I am showing a picture of a Vitala. This is the only image that I know of a Vitala. It doesn't have the distinctive giant brain. It's got a lot more elaborate clothing. I don't know that it's more like fancy or anything. Like this was pretty cool, but like it's definitely a different aesthetic that they're going for. This is the child spirit in like an adult body.
He really
Um,
has the teeth going on.
yeah, he's really feeling what he's doing. He's very enthusiastic. Uh, so I'm showing this for reference, but this is not consistent with how they're depicted nowadays. Um,
I have those toenails. Claws.
Trendsetter. So the Vitalaranas are kind of interesting in that because they consume thoughts and memories, they can kind of screw themselves if they're not careful. If they consume too much too fast, especially if they're new, they will just lose sense of who they are completely. They will
Oh.
lose any motivation because they will be completely caught up in the experiences of their victims, and they will basically be unable to determine what were my thoughts, what were my feelings, and what were the ones that I consumed, which is kind of cool. I like
It's
that.
interesting from a role playing perspective. As a GM, you can have a bad guy who thinks he's innocent.
Exactly. I really like that. Then what's interesting is they like to consume mortal humanoids as much as they can. If you're an undead with a mind, it will work. Like it will allow them to eat and not die. And like extra planar beings will also work. So like demons or genies
Fire
or like
elementals.
fire elementals, like they can do that, but again, they don't want to. And I find the planar beings one interesting because that implies that what they're really after is the soul, the thing that planar beings in Pathfinder don't have. Like they don't have a soul. That's not to say they're evil, but like metaphysically, they don't have that. That's what makes them different. That's what makes mortal beings so special. Um, so like that, it's not something that they state explicitly, but I'm like, that's the difference. You know, that's the mechanical difference between a genie and a human once you strip away all the magic and stuff.
And a demon or a devil is they don't have souls, but they essentially are souls.
Yeah,
They're
they're
souls that have
made
been
of souls,
converted
but
to
they
it.
don't have a soul. Yeah.
Yeah.
So so a lot of Vitalaranas do associate what they're doing or the level of power that they have with the level of control they need to exert in order to like manifest that power. Like the stronger they get, the more controlling they tend to become because they see the ability to exert control as proof of their power. That's just like a tendency among the Vitalarana.
Okay.
So like they tend to experiment with their powers by like consuming specific memories and like seeing what they can do. Like, oh, if I consume your memories only of this one child, what does that do to your family life? You as my victim, you know, like they get really nasty with it, like how they hurt their victims.
It's abuse
Um,
of power taken to a supernatural end.
exactly, and like the abuse of power, but also the precision of the abuse specifically, and like really
Okay.
knowing with certainty what you can do to your victim. Um, they also have a tendency to pick up on servants, like not only by like manipulating memories in such a way that these people don't understand that they're working for you, but also just through magic. Like these are the psychic vampires. They tend to develop psychic powers in addition to just being vampires. They tend to be, you know, they're the mages. They learn enchantment magic.
Okay.
Um, and then one of the really cool quirks of them is that if you like the really high level Vitalaranas, they can just make themselves better at something by consuming the memories of people who are good at that thing. So, like, if you want to be a good painter, go eat a painter's brain. Uh, and like it works for physical stuff too. Like they can make themselves good at a specific like athletic activity or even a fighting style by consuming the like memory and presumably the muscle memory of someone who's good at that.
Is it
Um,
temporary or permanent?
the lore doesn't make it clear.
Okay.
I would personally, I would rule it as temporary for low level and permanent for high level.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, that's the way I would probably do it. Or permanent if you've done it enough times. You know, like if you've consumed one painter, it lasts for a while, but the minute you've consumed 5 painters, you're just good at painting, you know.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Although now I'm thinking of like I consumed 5 painters, except they all do different styles, and I still can't paint. And then one of the really interesting things that I read about this is this can then extend to stuff like enlightenment, which in Pathfinder is a really big deal because like if you've achieved enlightenment, like true honest to God's enlightenment, like you are going to like basically Irori's heaven, and these vampires can just take that away from you and like be like, nope, this is mine now.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it's really cool
Like
that
they
they can do
stole your
that.
afterlife.
Uh-huh, it's awesome. It's
Wow.
cool how they can do stuff like that.
That's
Super evil, but awesome.
interesting. Yeah, people think of that as intrinsically tied to the soul, but if they're
Hmm.
stealing memories, then they steal every step along the way that you got there.
Hmm. They can steal your experience and your understanding. Like it's so
Wow.
evil.
Interesting. In vampire games that I tend to run, I like the idea of the essence of a person being carried in their blood. So if a vampire drinks some of the blood of a painter, for example, they can paint really fucking well for an hour,
Hmm. Oh, I like that. Yeah,
just because
that's
it's
cool.
interesting.
The Adyabao are the offspring of the Vitalarana. The picture I've shown is probably a little outdated because this was back when they were the offspring of the Vitala. They went by a different name. So they probably look slightly different from this, but basically they look mostly human. There's a slight chance that they could develop elongated fingers or large skulls. However, I'm just inferring that from the art,
Oh, okay.
not from any actual lore. We don't have good lore about them. We have their mechanical traits. They can get a bonus against will saves, which is or emotion effect will saves, and a step increase to successes, which I think is really
Yep,
powerful.
it
I think
is.
that's one of the most powerful ones. And then they can take a feat which lets them get temporary HP when they deal mental damage. Again,
Mhm.
really strong if you're playing like the right type of psychic.
Yeah.
Um, they're almost
Or a
always
cult
born from.
caster.
Sorry, what was that?
Or a cult caster.
Yes, yes, awesome on a bard. Um, they are generally born from a mortal mother. Their father is usually being possessed by a Vitala, or excuse me, by a Vitala Rana. So what's interesting here is that they are one of the few Dampiers whose fathers might not actually be undead. They could be alive at the time of their
Oh, they can possess
conception.
living people? Oh, because they can possess
Yep.
unconscious people.
Hmm.
Oh,
So the other cool thing about the Adyabao is, at least in like Vudra and the places where Vudrani peoples have settled, like in the Obari Ocean, um, or on the Isle of Jalmaray, they aren't necessarily feared. They have kind of carved out a place for themselves as like scholars, essentially, because people have kind of this understanding that like, oh, your progenitor has this great ability to like consume information and probably has a ton of information in their brains when you were conceived. Obviously you must be a good scholar too. Like it's just kind of a weird little thing of like, oh yeah, like we think we have this stereotype about you, but in this case it works in your advantage, assuming you want to be a scholar.
that's how folklore used to work before science. Like
Yeah,
this
no,
thing
it
is
totally
related
makes
to this
sense.
thing, sure.
Yeah, no, totally makes sense. So overall, I don't know that uh, I still think my first choice would be Moroi or a Moroi descended Dampier, but this is a very close second choice for both Vampire and Dampier. Like these vampires are really, really cool.
They are. I like how brainy they are.
Yeah, and I like how distinctive their weaknesses are, like the cold iron and the force effects, blind, like leaving them blind. Like that's really cool. The brain destruction thing feels really unique. It's not something I've ever heard of with a vampire before, so I really like that one.
Mhm. I'd probably dive deeper into Hindu religion and just role play a lot of that.
Yeah, that would be really cool. Then we go across the ocean even further to Tian Sha, the Dragon Empires, and we
That's good
find
art. Wow.
isn't that art sick? Yeah, the Jiangxi have some unbelievably good art. I'm really impressed with what they came up with for these vampires. Super super cool. But the Jiangxi, these were the last that whose date we can confirm. The Vrikolakas are still kind of an oddball. The Jiangxi were the fourth ones to evolve on Golarion. They evolved directly from the Strigoi, who basically like they basically like decided to just slumber for so long that their corpse started to suffer from rigor mortis, which is why the Jiangxi have this really distinctive hopping gait because their joints don't like to move anymore, so they jump around. Which, as far as I know, is very authentic to the original folklore. Um, Because
Yeah, it
like
was.
even
It
the
was.
vampire, even the vampire heartless in Kingdom Hearts move around like this because you fight them in the China world.
It was. That was the original thought that they were stiff and couldn't move. But the original inspiration for that, they think, was, and I mean, like expert occult researchers, not myself. I just read their work.
Yeah.
Um, it probably came from the priests carrying the corpses to be cremated, and they were going up mountain passes to do this. And so the only thing visible above the snowdrifts was the bouncing corpse that they were holding on rails.
Oh, that's interesting. That would make a lot of sense. That's cool.
Yeah.
Hmm. I like that. Either way, it is really cool to think of these guys as incredibly dangerous and also hopping around, you know. So the Jiangshi are unique in that they consume breath, which is kind of the universal word for either ki or chi in the Pathfinder setting. So, I mean, obviously they refer to it as ki or chi when you're a monk, but like outside of the lore, they might refer to it outside of the mechanics, they might refer to it as breath within the lore. These are turned from two sources. 1E calls them people who died with unfulfilled strong desires. 2E gets a little more specific and refers to specifically to priests. I'm not sure which one is more accurate to the folklore or if they're accurate to different types of folklore. I just don't know. Um, I don't think
There
these
was a
two.
caste difference
That's
because the people
true.
that could afford it would have proper burial and
Hmm.
proper blessings, and the
Hmm.
people who couldn't afford it were the ones that were afraid that their loved ones would come back as a Changchi.
Okay.
So it was probably like the priest could afford the burial, and other
Hmm.
people could.
Yeah, that would make sense. Either way, I don't think these are necessarily mutually exclusive either. I think you could easily make a Changshi who is both of these at the same time. Um, Interestingly, the Jiangshi cannot actively like create more of themselves. They tend to just kind of occur spontaneously. That I don't know how that is a thing that could have evolved from the other vampires, but this is just the way they work. This is just the way that they work now. So I don't know how that works. It doesn't matter.
Well, you see, when a
Um,
mommy vampire and a daddy vampire love each other very much,
then spontaneously somewhere else in the world, another vampire shows up.
a stork delivers a Changshi.
Yeah, somewhere else.
Yeah,
And in
different
some
continent.
village that's about to be horrified, a small vampire arises from the grave. So the Jiangshi are extremely distinctive, even among vampires. They have this really like folklore based fulu attached to their forehead. I forget exactly what's written on there. I read it and then I didn't write it down.
A blessing mantra.
Yeah, that would make sense. I'm sure that's right. They have very stiff joints and limbs, hence the hopping around. They can, that obviously they have claws. They can bend their digits and elbows if they need to, but most of the time they're very stiff and they have this really distinctive movement pattern.
They have
Uh,
branches coming from their fingers. Jeez.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I wrote down claws. I probably should have written down extremely prominent, ridiculous claws. Uh, they also have this like really, even compared to like the Nosferatu, they have this really dry and tightly stretched skin compared to other vampires. So extremely distinctive, much more corpse-like than a lot of the vampires outside of the Nosferatu.
Apparently there have been a lot of Changshi movies. I've just never seen them. They're almost all Chinese.
That I mean that makes sense. Yeah, I've never seen one. So again, there is a Changshi inspired vampire in Castlevania, but it's one of those side characters that gets absolutely no lines, and then gets wasted by Alucard in a final fight. Spoilers for season 2.
Oh, part of that might be the Chinese government put a ban on any Changshi that is used that they use the term Changshi unless they're
Oh,
used really briefly.
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm, that would make sense. Oh, never heard of that before.
I just stumbled upon that fact.
So the Jiangxi are another one, like the Vitalarana. Their mechanics are way more distinct, and like they have a very unique identity. Again, because they're not pulling from European folklore, they're pulling from folklore outside of what clearly inspired the Nosferatu, the Vrikolakas, and the Moroi. So they have this ability to leap as a movement that just straight up can avoid reactions. So if you're a fighter who relies on AOO, don't fight these guys. It's really bad. Uh, um,
Means
uh,
reactive strike.
yeah, exactly. They have breath sense, which is interesting. This is their precise sense. They can't see beyond 5 feet, period.
Oh my god, that's awful.
Yeah, so they have the worst weaknesses, but their breath sense is really good. It's a precise sense up to
Wow.
60 feet. But if you hold your breath, you're invisible to them.
You can
They
hold
cannot
your
see you.
breath.
If you hold
Holy
your breath,
shit.
they can't see you.
Wow.
But you do, the game makes it clear you can't just say I'm holding my breath. You have to follow the
Drowning
suffocation and
rules.
drowning rules.
Yeah.
So it makes I like that. That's really cool. They do
There's a
have
cantrip that lets you hold it for like an hour though.
yeah, that kind of would make this fight very, very easy. Um, I think the stronger ones do gain the ability to see. Like if you're a really strong Jiangqi, you do eventually get the ability to see back. But the weaker ones straight up cannot see at all, unless you're within 5 feet of them.
I love
Um,
that.
yeah, it's really cool. They have the drain chi ability. It's just like draining blood mechanically. It causes drained, but it's hitting your chi. They have this warped Fulu, which makes them immune to all scrolls and wands or other magic items that cast spells that don't drain a slot. So like a staff would still be able to affect them. But like a scroll, a wand, a magic item that has a spell in it that's like a once per day thing. Um, None of those are effective so long as they have the Fulu on their head. That said, it can be removed. There you make I think it's a thievery or excuse me, thievery check against their perception. And then you can take it away. They can make another one, but it takes time. They also have their like restoration ability. This is the only one that's not tied to a coffin or a burial site. They just restore 1 HP after a minute after they drop to 0 HP. But uh, if you scatter hen eggs or glutinous rice over their corpse, they are destroyed immediately. And this comes down to this sounds weird, but it actually makes a ton of sense. They have an aversion to what is considered aligned chi. And these are things that in East Asian folklore were considered aligned, like naturally
Makes
aligned.
sense.
Yep.
Egg
And
is the
that's
source of life, and rice is the same kanji, same character as the word life.
Yep. So that makes a ton of sense. Like that 100% makes sense.
Sure.
At the same time, another good option for this is Darkwood, which is just it's a resource in the Pathfinder setting. If they're killed by a
Okay.
Darkwood weapon, they just die. So like if you're fighting one of these guys, do that. Very easy.
No, I will absolutely require my players to throw eggs at the corpse.
Exactly.
You
Throw
have to egg the
or
corpse.
glutinous rice. It's gonna look like a Midwestern wedding. They're just throwing rice in the air. We wanted to do that, and then we found out it was bad for the birds, so we didn't.
Oh, at
Uh,
your wedding? Okay, yeah.
yeah. So they do have unique
Oh, they
revulsions.
do birdseed now.
That's true. I have seen that, not at a wedding I've been to, but I've heard of it. That makes a lot more sense, honestly.
Yeah.
So their unique revulsion is a mirror again, or ringing bells. And to this, I'm just saying, hello, thaumaturge with a mirror and bell implement. You are going to have the best time fighting the Jiangxi. And then they have this unique ability called Bitter Epiphany. If they are reminded of the fact that they are in fact undead and disconnected from the living world, this can cause them to be stupefied. Now the game outlines like you do this by bringing them near a shrine that has offerings having recently been placed at it. I would probably rule like if you can find another way to do this by like showing them a living family member or doing something else that's a little more personal to them, I think you could
Okay.
easily do something fun like that.
I see your
Um,
point. I think the purpose of those first two, the Revulsion and the Bitter Epiphany, are because this is Taoist based, and
mhm,
there are a lot of ringing bells and Taoist rituals and Taoist shrines sort of
mhm.
line the streets in China.
Yeah, yeah, no, I that makes a ton of sense. So yeah. All right. Now the Jiangxi
Oh
are
my God, are you only halfway through your slides?
no, I'm about done.
Oh,
I've
okay,
only
because the
got
little
the
scroll bar is halfway.
Oh, no, no, no. The Vricola Cas is all I have left after these guys. No, 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 no. We are not going to be here past midnight. I'm not going to make that happen.
Ah, ah.
No, it's okay. Relax. We're almost done.
I wouldn't mind, but I think it would eat into your
I would
schedule.
mind. I have to go to choir practice tomorrow morning.
Well, think of vampires during choir.
Yeah, exactly. I'll be doing my Latin chanting. Uh, we're Protestants. We don't chant in Latin.
Catholic, we do.
Yeah. So Jiangxi society, plagued by nightmares of a painful afterlife. Yeah. So like a lot of the Jiangxi, when they come back, are haunted by these visions of an afterlife that they manage to escape. It's unclear in the lore if like this is just a vision of something, like if this is just a vision of like the trauma that death caused to them, because by virtue of coming back, it means that they didn't actually make it to the full afterlife because they weren't judged. You know, like if they were judged by Pharasma, they can't come back. But presumably they might be seeing either the trauma induced in their brain by the act of dying, or they saw the path that gets them to Pharasma. You know, something in the River of Souls horrified them, which
It
I
could have
mean,
just been a personal hell. That's reflected in the Vampire the Masquerade duplicate of the Changshi. They have a power called Rift, where they make rifts to their own personal hell and then can dimensionally gate out of that anywhere.
that would actually make a lot of sense. Yeah. I like it. Ultimately, I don't think the mechanics matter. What matters is the
Ow.
characterization. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just a lore nerd.
I agree, apparently, with real world lore. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so like a lot of these Jiangxi, the speculation is that like they have like two major motivations. One is they want to stay alive so that they don't have to go to this afterlife whose nightmares plague them. The other theory is that they want to spread their misery and terror to others so that they aren't the only ones bearing it anymore. They are repulsed by all forms of harmonious or harmonious chi. I already kind of talked about that. So like all naturally aligned chis, like hen eggs or glutinous right or dark wood, that's why those mechanical things exist. That's why you can kill them with these three items. Also, there's a fun quirk. If you're playing a monk who has access to chi spells, you can expend one of your focus points to make their drain chi not work on you.
That is awesome.
Isn't that so cool? I'm so glad they
Yeah.
gave monks that unique
That's
ability.
perfect.
It's perfect. I'm so glad they did this. If I was running a character who wasn't playing a monk but was using like the spirit warrior archetype, I would
Yeah.
also let them do something similar.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Totally makes sense.
hmm One of the things that's interesting is that as they age, the more breaths that they consume seem to be cumulative, because they just get stronger. It doesn't necessarily mean like, you know, they don't seem to like process the souls and then lose them over time. It seems
Okay.
like just the longer you live and the more souls you can, or more breath you consume, the stronger you get overall. And the strongest ones become what are called ministers. I don't think we have a stat block for a minister, but
Okay.
they are super strong. They've been around for, you know, hundreds to thousands of years, and their primary motivation tends to revolve around finding new and rare chi that they can consume to kind of add it to their collection and give themselves a new experience. So like they might go after a dragon or a sage or like something enlightened that might be on its way to joining Irori. So really like interesting like extraplanar beings or you know, like extraterrestrial beings or particularly learned creatures or something from a different region.
Okay.
So kind of an interesting little piece of motivation there.
As far as I
Then
know, that's a divergence from real world folklore because they are supposed to use their chi to keep their bodies alive, keep themselves here.
mhm.
But I like that. That
Yeah.
makes a more interesting story.
I think, and I mean, you could also, I think you could do it in, if you wanted to keep that element of the folklore, you could alter the ministers to be like, no, they've consumed way more than they need. You know, you could do it of like, oh, they've built up this giant bank that has
Hmm.
made them so strong that they could sustain themselves basically till the end of the universe, you know, and they've got so much extra. You know, I think you could, I don't think those two things have to be mutually exclusive.
Okay.
Then we get to the Rushi. These are the offspring of the Jiangxi. They are usually born of a particularly dark magical ritual. Jiangxi don't typically like they don't usually have the ability to conceive because their body is, you know, the rigor mortis stuff. They're very corpse adjacent. Some Jiangxi do have the ability to possess mortals. So like if you possess a
Ah,
mortal, there's enough vampirism in that mortal to potentially give birth to a Jiangxi, or excuse
okay.
me, to a Rushi. They are always super pale, so pretty similar to a lot of the a lot of the Dampiers. They have really distinctly pale irises and pupils. We already talked about like that's a thing that a lot of the Dampiers have, but
That
the
is so neat and pretty.
yeah, the Rushi in particular, it's really distinctive. And much like their vampiric forebears, they tend to be very stiff in their movements. So, like, they move awkwardly. They're kind of jerky when they move around. Not nearly as much as like an actual Jiangxi, but enough to be noticeable.
Hmm.
They have these quirks to where they're kind of good at math and languages, because this kind of derives from the uh, so I'm going to back up just a tiny bit. The Jiangxi who died with, or who were people who died with unfulfilled desires, the specifics of those desires become lost and it mutates into like this really random obsessiveness that jumps
Oh, like
around a
counting
lot.
rice
Yes,
kernels. Okay.
exactly. This then
Okay.
passes along to the Rushi, who get the eye for numbers feat. They get trained in society, and they tend to pick up math and languages really, really quickly.
Interesting.
Um, they can also eventually take an ability called Hopping Step, which is you can like kind of mimic the jumping motion that the Jiangxi can do to just straight up avoid ground-based hazards, which is pretty cool. Your speed is limited, but you can just like jump over traps without triggering them, which is pretty cool.
I do like that ability. Do you know what level that is?
I think it's 5, might be
Oh,
9, but I think it's
okay.
5.
Okay.
All right, Vrikolakas, last one. So the
Yay.
Vrikolakas are the
My
ones
favorite.
who showed up last in the lore. They're very new. I don't think they exist in 1E at all. I'm pretty sure they're a new 2E thing. So there's not a lot of lore on them. I only have 2 slides on them. Uh, we don't know where they derived in the timeline. I think they were later, but I don't know when. So I've been referring to like first, second, third, fourth. These guys showed up somewhere in there and might bump some other ones later in like second, third, or fourth to show up. They
Weird.
probably, based on what they look like and where they are, which is mostly Avestan, probably evolved from either the Nosferatu or the Moroi, especially because they consume blood. They are the third blood drinkers. Um, these are almost, at least the first ones, and like any ones that are spontaneously created are born from vengeful or angry spirits. So it feels very folklorish
Yeah.
in terms of their derivation. They also tend to bear disease, but I don't think it's like, it doesn't seem to be like a thing like the Nosferatu where they were plague ridden before they raised. It's just that they're corpses. They carry a lot of diseases on them. You know, that it doesn't appear to be tied to their vampirism, more to the fact that they're dead, you know.
That
They
again also fits the Strigoi folklore origination of their bringers of disease.
Yeah, yep, and that yeah, exactly. Especially because these are the ones that actually need to return to their burial site. They can't make a new coffin for themselves and move it around. They have to go back to the place where they were buried.
Wow.
So physically, these are easily the most animalistic of the vampires. Like you can see here, like they walk around on all fours. They can stand on 2 legs. They have hands instead of paws, but like they're meant to run around on all fours if they're going at top speed. They have really prominent claws on both limbs. They have very animalistic jaw structure. And then they have this really twisted, like overdeveloped spinal column that kind of gives them this distinctive hunch.
That is
Um,
weird. Does it say anything about what the point of that is?
I nope, nothing at all. I think the
Okay.
artist was just feeling it that day. Uh, Interestingly, it's not all distinct on all of them. Like this is a picture of one digging himself out of his own grave. Like it's still
Mhm.
prominent, but it's not the same level.
Okay.
So um, their skin color tends to be pinkish, but there's another art of one of them that is very, very gray. So that doesn't seem there seems to be some variation there.
Oh,
Um,
this follows the Balkan belief of the Vrikolakas that they are ruddy and bloated because they feed on blood.
Oh, that would make sense. Okay. And see, I'm not at all familiar with Balkan folklore. So yeah, that definitely a blind spot for me. They have some distinctly unique abilities. They're the only vampires without grab, which is interesting. They instead have rend. So like if they hit you with two claw attacks, they deal extra damage. They have fangs, they have a climb speed, but they also carry the actual bubonic plague. So not great.
I'm ashamed for my people.
The Children of the Night ability, they can command rats, wargs, and werewolves, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that they could just command werewolves who are in canon sentient creatures. So if you have a character who has the were creature archetype, you could mess them up with this
Oh my God,
creature.
you're right. Oh, that's messed up.
Hmm.
And that also fits folklore because Vrikolakas originally meant wolf hair. Um,
Oh,
the origin of the word wasn't Greek. It was, I forget what it was, recall, something like that.
okay.
Uh, that was from Serbian area, and then it was taken by Greek into Vrikolakas, and Vrikolakas meant werewolf, but then when it translated back to the Slavic region, then it meant both vampire and werewolf, sort of like
Mm-hmm.
witch meant witch and ghost.
Like what we were talking about earlier, they were very inconsiderate with their naming conventions
Right.
and made it as confusing as possible for us. They do have a cool ability that cool for a GM, hell for players.
Yeah, for a
They
GM,
have
that's cool.
pestilential aura. If you get within 5 feet of them, you get bubonic plague. So, like, if you don't fight them in melee with a range or with a reach weapon, you're just gonna get the plague, and you're gonna have to deal with that.
The plague
So,
isn't fun in the system either.
no, it's not. It's really bad. Um, Interestingly, they do like their natural form is animalistic. They do have the ability to change back to their humanoid form.
That had to be stolen directly from the Dracula movie in the 90s.
Probably.
It had to be. They're like, I'm young now.
Yep, exactly. Boom, young and hot. What are you going to do? They do have this ability. So, Feral Corruption is their distinct transformation ability. So, when they drop to 0 hit points, they turn into a spirit, and that spirit transfers to a nearby animal. So, their body is derived from animal bodies after their first like death, essentially.
Further binding them to the werewolf lore. And
Hmm.
Jesus, that's impossible to kill them.
It makes it very hard. You can wipe them out while they're transforming because it does take 1d4 days. So if you know where to look, you can go back there and you can cut their head off. At which point, once they're decapitated, they're dead forever.
Why are you cutting the head off that rat? Trust me.
Trust me, we want to do this. Yeah. Also, it is so one quirk about this: feral corruption does not specify how big the animal has to be, but it does specify that the new body is made from the flesh of the old body. So you could get a Vrikolakas who inhabited a squirrel, and they're like 6 inches tall. Presumably, they still look like this, but they're really tiny.
Yeah, that's actually a squirrel gravestone. You just can't tell.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell, and he has his bushy tail hasn't gotten out from the dirt yet.
Right. Oh God, I'm gonna have so much fun with them.
Yeah, they're really cool. Now, there are some things if the animal does get the ability to make a will save, but like it's an animal, its will save isn't going to be very good. If the animal does succeed, they just hop into another animal. If there are no animals within range, then they're dead. But I mean, if you're mostly fighting these guys in the wild, you know, there's animals everywhere. So they do have the create spawn ability as a Moroi. Because we don't know that much about their lore yet. We don't know how they handle this. Like, are they careful with it? Do they just kind of go willy-nilly? Um, we just don't know that in the lore yet. They do have some unique weaknesses. So obviously, I already mentioned decapitation. If you think somebody who's dying is going to turn into a Vrikolakas, just stab or just cut their head off when they die, because the decapitation prevents them from turning straight up. They are also burial site bound. So like they have to return to their grave at least once a week, and they have to spend at least 24 hours there. If they fail to do that, then they turn into a spirit and inhabit an animal body and have to run back to their burial site. There's a time limit on that. If they don't make it, they die. So they are. Sorry, go
Insert
ahead.
something here. If the in folklore, if the Vrikolakas spread its disease to its family members, and the family members died of the disease, they would also rise as Vrikolakas.
That And see, you could actually do a lot with that, because in the game, like they already have the bubonic plague and the pestilential aura. It would be really easy to be like, no, you died of their plague. They're vampires too now. Like that's a really easy way to adapt the mechanics to tell a story.
Totally.
That's cool. Yeah. And because they're new, we don't have any idea on their society, and we have no idea if they can create Dampiers. I don't think they can. Because they don't appear to have the parts you would need to do that conventionally, and they're not particularly magical. So I don't think they can, but they're new. You know, they've only existed for a few years in terms of storytelling, so they probably will have their own version of Dampier eventually.
I hope so. Otherwise, I'm going to say it can be an awakened animal, because it's an animal that returns to the burial site that transforms.
I would probably do like either animalistic or plague born. You know, like really, really like disease ridden or something. You know,
That'd work.
Like you could do some cool stuff with this. But that brings me to the end of the Vrikolakas, and I have to say, thank you for coming to my dead talk.
Oh my god! Oh my god! I didn't read that last slide before.
I even edited the little logo on the screen. And look, I made a little me.
It's just, dude, with a Pathfinder symbol for a head.
That's what I look like in real life.
God. Oh my god, man. That pun really got me. Jesus.
I ran it by my wife the first time. I was like, does this work? And she immediately started laughing. I'm like, it'll work. I can work with that.
Yes, definitely works. Oh, fuck. Oh, that's funny.
So that's it. That's what I got on vampires outside of the 2 vampire gods I'm talking about later this month.
Can you go back to the Svetoker and then maybe the Moroi? I thought there was one thing that I didn't say. Oh, it's the Rushi. Sorry. I already talked about the Moroi and the Svetoker thing. So the Rushi, I guess it's specifically the Changshi that this makes sense for. So the Changshi, the original folklore was that when they die, when any person in Taoist China died, they had 2 souls inside their bodies. One of the souls of the Changshi would go on to the afterlife, and the other remainder of the soul, the sense of identity, the Po, would stay and animate the corpse.
Oh.
So it still has part of its original soul. So it's like got some of itself left over.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, it's just a ghost.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So like that's why they feel incomplete, is because they're literally missing half of themselves.
Yeah, they are literally incomplete.
That's cool. I like that. I've never heard that before. I learned a lot today.
That's what you pay me for, Phil.
Yeah. I didn't agree to a payment yet. Do you accept GP?
Yes, of course.
I have lots of that. It's all on character sheets, but I have it.
Oh man, you would be fun to play a role-playing heavy campaign with.
I am currently running through Claws of the Tyrant on Foundry with some buddies. It is quite fun.
Uh, that's not the mythic one, is it?
No, no, no. That's the anthology adventure. The Tyrants, the Tarbathon themed
Oh,
anthology
okay.
from earlier this year.
I don't think I read through that one. Yeah, no, I did not.
It's awesome. If you like classic horror as like a kind of genre jumping idea, basically the first adventure, so it's three adventures in one book. They all kind of tell different chapters in a semi-continuous story. The first one is survival horror a la Walking Dead. The second one is a kind of like Ocean's 11, except we're all undead. And then it's awesome. It's so good.
Is
And
it
then
like a thieving campaign?
yeah, you're literally infiltrating a castle to take an artifact.
Oh, that's
Uh, but
fun.
you're agents of the Whispering Way. You play the bad guys. And then the third one is super high level. You start at 18 and you go to 20. And you are the elite crusaders in the Knights of Last Wall. And you are like stopping one of Tarbathon's generals from basically rewriting reality to make himself not a bad guy.
Yeah, okay, because that works.
Well, it would mess a bunch of stuff up if he tried, so you don't want him to succeed. He might erase two goddesses from existence.
Jeez.
It's messed up.
That's interesting.
It's
I could see
really
running that
good.
really high level one with the right people. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they
It's
have to know
really
how
cool.
to make a high level character.
It's really awesome. It has convinced me that Paizo should do. This is the first anthology they've ever done, and they should do more of them. Like I enjoyed it so much. From a reading perspective, obviously, we're still in the first adventure of the three right now, but
Anthology, as in like each one can be taken separately.
yep, you could play all three of them as standalone adventures, or you could run them back to back to back. You
Yeah, that's a
don't
great idea.
continue characters between them.
Yeah, that
Um,
is a great idea.
yeah, it's really cool. There is some very slight crossover between one and three because assuming your heroes survive in one, in theory, your heroes in three could potentially meet them. They don't have to, but
Okay,
they are there. They're in the same spot.
that's a
So
cute continuance.
yeah, it's nice.
I forgot to mention Vorlogs.
Yes, yes.
Um, there's not a whole lot to tell about them. They are the leftovers of what happens when a vampire is trying to create another of their kind because they're in love. And the original vampire that's creating the new human into a vampire gets killed mid process. And the newly half vampire escapes.
Mm,
So they are filled with sadness and loss, and they can never love again. And they're obsessed with their lost love. They have little baby fangs that do less
mm,
damage,
mm-hmm,
and they can still eat food, but they still have to drink blood, but they're not very good at it. And when they die, they
mm.
dissolve into a puddle of tears.
That is really cool. That is awesome. Oh, now I want to homebrew that. Is that from, did you say that was from Masquerade?
Ravenloft.
Ravenloft. Okay, cool. That is cool. I really like that idea. I'm sure they can't take it for OGL reasons, but like that is really awesome.
It's
Um,
fun and weird.
yeah, it feels very distinctive, but it also like it feels new, it feels fun, it feels interesting, but it also feels so grounded in like vampire pop culture
Yeah, it does.
that it doesn't feel disconnected.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining Jake and I on this exploration of the vampires of Pathfinder. I'll be back later this month with videos on both Zura and Nin.
Come poop. Not sorry. Uh, I just been having so much fun, and I'm glad that I got to refresh my memory about some of the stuff that I experienced personally, but also just some of the lore of vampires that I just haven't thought about a lot recently. So I greatly appreciate being included in this. It was really encouraging and fun to throw my 2 cents in here.
Yeah, this was fun. I learned a lot too. You had a lot. This is kind of what I thought would happen, whereas you taught me a lot about vampire lore that I didn't know. So that was fun. So good talk. Thanks
Same
for
here,
joining
because
me.
you were willing to pour over all the books.
I'd do that anyway. You saved me from having to turn 30 pages of notes into a script that was way too long, so it's much appreciated.
Cool. I'm glad.